Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to Traversing the Metaverse, a Caribbean perspective. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar titled Traversing the Metaverse, a Caribbean perspective. I'm Michelle Garcia, Communications and Marketing Specialist at the CTU. I'm your host for today's proceedings. Now, just to go through a few housekeeping rules. To interact with our speakers today, kindly use the panel located to the right on this session page. To open and close this panel, select the first icon of the side menu. The first option is live chat, where you can speak with other attendees and comment on the live session. The second option, polls, is where all polling questions will appear during the session. The next option is Q&A. We will ask that all questions be placed in this section for ease of repeating. Questions placed here will be directed to and answered by our speakers. Should you experience difficulties while using the platform, please email us at events@ctu.int for assistance. Today's proceedings is also being streamed to Facebook Live and YouTube. I would like to welcome our almost 900 participants on this platform today. The biographies of all our speakers today can be viewed on the Google platform. I would now like to invite Mr. Rodney Taylor, Secretary General of the CTU, to make welcome remarks. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. I am Rodney Taylor, as Michelle pointed out, Secretary General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, or CTU for short. And I'd just like to start by saying that the CTU was founded by CARICOM heads of government way back in 1989. And they were conscious of the need for harmonized telecommunications policy within our CARICOM member states. The CTU provides advisory services to CARICOM ministers who have responsibility for information and communication technologies, or ICTs for short. Of course, back in 1989, the technological landscape since 1989, the technological landscape has changed dramatically. In 1989, if you recall, that's the year that Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. I'm sure that not even he envisaged a thing called social media, online video sharing platforms, and let alone a metaverse. But that's the nature of technological innovation. It happens with or without policy and regulatory frameworks, even though bad regulatory frameworks can serve to stymie its growth and development. But it is inevitable. And so, at the CTU, we think it is important to have a discussion on this trending topic, and for us to bring a regional perspective to bear on it. And in so doing, help to build public awareness of the technological developments that are shaping the so-called metaverse, the opportunities, challenges, and risks, and the skills that we need to focus on if we are to be at the forefront of this new technological wave. For some, the metaverse is the internet reimagined. It's the next most exciting evolution. Others would say it's akin to the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s and a nefarious plan to create a dubious underworld. And still others would say it is too early to even pronounce on it. In 2005, I published some research on e-commerce diffusion in small island developing states, which looked at how institutional interventions can help drive the uptake of technology. Certainly within the Caribbean context, and given our political systems, government policy is critical, but it is not the only ingredient. There must also be a corresponding demand by citizens and significant private sector capacity to innovate and provide technological solutions within the local economy. One thing we must never do in the region is to relinquish all technological innovation to the so-called developed countries, and to be consumers of technology products and services residing in a distant cloud alone. We have too much regional talent for that. Yes, we must build global networks and collaborate, but we must also take ownership and be craftsmen of our fate, if I may borrow from the national anthem of Barbados. which is a lovely segue into the partnership to host this webinar by the CTU and the Government of Barbados. Barbados, of course, announced its intention to establish an embassy in the Metaverse to extend its global diplomatic reach in this new frontier. More recently, I've seen pronouncements by St. Vincent and the Grenadines in relation to the hosting of a carnival in the Metaverse. I say, go for it. I want to acknowledge the work of our next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Gabriel Abed, in being at the forefront of this and other initiatives in Barbados, and indeed the region, because our small size should not be a hindrance. And so today we have three themes, as I mentioned. The first, in the form of a knowledge cafe, basically a conversation about the technologies underpinning the metaverse. You've heard about non-fungible tokens or NFTs, blockchain, virtual reality or VR, cryptocurrencies, and others. Our objective is not to make you experts in this terminology, but to provide some level of exposure to the terms and why they are important. What makes this technological convergence different from what obtains now with older internet technologies? We must also look at the business or economic opportunities, challenges, and risks. There are trillions of dollars to be made if we believe the predictions, but there are also challenges as well. For one thing, are we too late in the game as a region? As we know, technology moves very quickly. Do we have the political will, the right regulatory frameworks, the right legislation, the right people? What about the threats of cybersecurity, data breaches, and data privacy? Lastly, what skills do we need to be focusing on if we are to give our young people opportunities in this new frontier? And I am pleased on that note to say that the last session is being moderated by one of our CARICOM youth ambassadors, Java Sealy. One could say that with a name like Java, he was born for this. In addition to developing our young talent, we must also be able to attract talent here in the region as well. I have repeatedly said that if I can work anywhere in the world, why would I want to be covered in 13 inches of snow when I can be a beach in the Caribbean with good fiber connectivity back to my head office somewhere else? COVID-19 has shown us in most definitive terms that we can in fact work from anywhere in the world. And kudos to those as many as 9 Caribbean countries that have embraced this new opportunity, which has already been paying dividends. I've said enough. So let me close by thanking our close to 900. I think we got another 100 this morning. Registered participants, a record for a CTU webinar, which it is my intention to break. I think that's what records are for. I want to challenge you to work with us here at the CTU in whatever capacity you can to help us take this region that we love forward. We have the talent, we have been blessed by nature with the most beautiful surroundings and with beautiful people, generous in spirit and welcoming to the world. Let us embrace this opportunity and let us be pioneers in shaping the future of the internet. Without further ado, I welcome His Excellency Mr. Gabriel Abed, Ambassador of Barbados to the United Arab Emirates, to kick off the chat. Joining him will be Mr. Borges Sebastian and Mr. Rish Lotlikar, founder and CEO of Superworld. I thank you for your time, your interest, and your participation today. Your Excellency, it's over to you. I'm sure you want to bring us greetings from your neck of the universe and help us delve into what really is this thing called the metaverse. Over to you.
Good afternoon, but in some cases in the Caribbean, good morning. I'm calling in from the United Arab Emirates, where I'm currently posted. I just want to commend the Caribbean Telecommunications Union on putting this on today. I think you started off by saying, SG, it's very important that the Caribbean embarks on these types of technologies because they inevitably represent the future. And we're quite fortunate today that Mr. Sebastian of Sandbox and Harish of Superworld are joining us. And I look forward to a lively discussion where we dive into the various nits and bits of the metaverse world. With that being said, do we have Sebastian and Harish on at the moment?
Yep, We're here.
Great. I think the first thing that we could jump into, and I could probably pose this to either of you guys, the very basics. If you can both, I know the metaverse right now, there's a lot of confusion about what it is and what it is not. And I would appreciate if either of you could start off by giving our panelists and our audiences the definition in your view of what the metaverse is.
Would you like to start, Ashwish?
Feel free, but I can go ahead. Yeah, so in my view, the metaverse is a combination of your life online, offline. It encompasses all of the virtual worlds and platforms. Essentially, it is a persistent interface that enables you to do everything that you love and enhances your life through the work, your play, education, literally every aspect of your life.
Okay.
Sebastian?
Well, I'd like to add to that. For us, is also about like being able to access new type of experience, more social, more immersive, into a series of digital parallel universes, virtual worlds, through an avatar, through a 3D representation of yourself that you can carry across all those multiple different virtual worlds, which means that there is this notion of your identity is actually truly yours, in a sense of it can be used and moved across different application, services and worlds, which is currently not the case in too many so-called metaverses, which effectively are just virtual world or video games, but closed environments owned by one single entity operating it and not really allowing their users to carry their digital identity, assets, and currency across the board.
So in a way, we can consider the metaverse a much more immersive version of what the internet has to offer in terms of communication and social interaction. But more recently, and this is in the last couple of months, we've seen one large company come out with its rebranding to Meta, i.e. Facebook. And there seems to be a lot of confusion from the market of, is the metaverse just this one place to visit? And I would like, for the audience's benefit, for us to go into that particular question. Is there a single metaverse?
Well, I'm not surprised when I see like this company, Facebook, as announcing from one day to another, like they're rebranding themselves. Like Facebook it's currently touching the life, impacting the life, probably 1 billion people, more or less, which are using it on a regular basis. And without any specific announcement before, even the announcement they did, it's not really answering to a lot of questions around like, okay, we're rebranding ourselves, we are becoming a metaverse. What does it mean? And that's like not really satisfying what they've shown to the world about it. So that's triggered a lot of questioning, a lot of attention, of course, and also a lot of concerns, because people in 2022 and 2021, they are more aware that like they were actually being collected data upon to be sold and resold that data to advertisers and so on. They've seen like a lot of issues not beyond privacy around like how Facebook has been impacting society, has been impacting politics as well, and for the good and sometimes for not the good, the worse. And so like we're evolving into a more complex world around the notion. And honestly, I find it's really not enough what they've shown to really push through the idea of metaverse. And it's not enough specifically as the core of their business model, which is like around user data collection and monetization. Nothing was thought about, like anything that could have pushed toward a more Web3, more community and user-driven less centralized approach. They refer to it as NFT and blockchain, and they say, we're looking at it, but well, who knows? Like, that's not for us now. So basically, they left out everything that might have sound promising towards a better internet and everything better for users.
When you
Yeah,
say
I
a better,
agree with those points as well. I think centralization is really, not the future of the metaverse. So, what Sebastian was talking about in terms of the concepts of creating very open, interoperable models is, I think this is where it's going. And so I would say there is one metaverse. It is a combination of all these virtual worlds, but they're open and interoperable.
can you go in a bit deeper, Rish, about what this future interaction looks like, and specifically touch on something that Sebastian started on, which is the Web3 component of it all? Because on one end, in the past, as early as over a decade ago, we saw platforms like Second Life come out and offer the first of its kind, or the first of many of its kind, of metaverses. We've subsequently seen Roblox and other companies come out offering metaverses, but more recently, in the last couple of years, we've seen actors like yourself and Sandbox, Somnium, Decentraland come out, and they fundamentally redefine what the metaverse is meant to be. Can you go into specifically what you started to touch on why it's different?
Yeah, I think that the concept of permitting, enabling, and assisting the community being formed and thriving in a virtual world as part of the metaverse is a very important part of the future of what we're building. So, again, how can you enable people to come together in an environment where they can cooperate, where they can have ownership, how they can have transparency in those transactions? So I think we're all really building, tools to give our community the ownership of the content they're producing, whether it's a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, that allows them to come together and actually raise capital for a certain cause. There's a lot of technology here, particularly on the Web3 side, that really changes the game for the new models that we're enabling here for our community members. I also think that, as Sebastian aptly touched on, the types of immersion are enabled by AR and VR, audio, soon to be haptics. So again, we're able to really go into these worlds in ways that we haven't been able to do, even in Second Life, which was amazing. And Phil Rosedale really, I think we're all kind of standing on the shoulders of giants here. So there has been a lot of progress over the last 20, 30 years in this space. So you can't discount that. But I'm really excited about what Sandbox and amomg and the variety of other companies, Decentraland, a lot of them are doing in this space. What we're working on at Superworld, as an example, is more focused on reality and the real world. And so again, I think that we can kind of serve as a gateway in terms of what we're doing to all of these other worlds and other ways that people get together. And that's our goal. But I'm very excited about the whole space and what the way that we're enabling technology to empower our community.
Hold on, I want to take this back just a notch, because we have audience members that are now tuning in for the first time. They've heard the term metaverse thrown around. And to them, the basic question is, what's the difference between the metaverse and a website? I can access a website from my computer, I could view content, I could watch videos, I can interact socially. So let's just take it back a notch to touch on that layman aspect of what's the difference here?
As I was alluding to, in our understanding of the metaverse, it's more than like a 2D interface as a website where information is actually created socially or are broadcasted to you from one central entity. The approach we are seeing in the metaverse is like really yourself being projected through an avatar, meaning like you have your physical self and then you have your virtual self that are actually capable to engage with different experiences with other users into various activities that range, I think, into many part and slice of life in a way. Like you can, of course, work on the metaverse, have meeting, business meeting, attend conference, job fairs, etc. You can play games, but there's so many different flavors of all the kind of things you can experience as well as you walk through your avatar into this one or multiple virtual worlds. It include like virtual concert, art gallery, museum, virtual shows, games, parties, and more. You get to own everything you build and you get rewarded for your engagement, your presence into those virtual worlds. It's also a very different approach toward like what's the value of your time, being your presence and the content you help create to populate this world, made this new virtual worlds of experiences. One other thing, and I think it's quite important, like the whole Web2 and all those social services are built on user contribution. However, like what user got in return is very little. Like I don't think like a lot of the population that engage with social media can say they are making a revenue or even living out of it. It's such a tiny portion, and it's still very limited into like how the chances of access to it and the revenue distribution across countries has happened. In the metaverse, this new form of Web3 decentralized based metaverse we're pushing for, like the value distribution going back 100% to the users and creators, it's really enabling new paradigms in the way we're approaching the design of that world and the value of it. And to put it concretely speaking, we're seeing countries in what we would call less developed economies being on par with top tier economies in the metaverse. It's a greater equalizer of chances for those new users who participate into building those digital nations online.
Well, this is quite interesting, and both you and Haresh have thrown around a term that I would ask you before I ask my next question is help for our audience define Web 2 and Web 3, because you guys have been using that term quite a bit. And you have to remember that majority of the persons on this call are from the Caribbean, and they're now being exposed to these types of systems. So for their benefit, what is Web 2 and what's Web 3?
All right, I'll start. So essentially, well, we think there is three versions of the internet. It started initially Web 1, basically people or companies publish website, and the information on this website is being consumed by visitors, people like you and myself. We browse the web, but we don't contribute to that information, basically. This is just like one way of consuming. In Web 2, to put things simply, it's essentially the social web. So basically, the platform and the content evolve as users keep contributing to more content towards it in the form of like text, in the form of with blogging, in the form of photos, videos, and music files, so media file as well that they share toward their peers and social networks. Most of the giant of internet in Web 2 rely on user-generated content and social media, essentially. So we are thinking, and they became the top platform in Web 2, like we call them the GAFA now. The main issue is like in Web 2, all that content is being submitted by users, but it's still controlled by those few entities that get to decide like what information can be put on and not put on online, can be moderated, and what happens in terms of like your own data, your own content you submit, how you're being tracked online, etc. So it created a lot of divergent patterns that actually have been fueling the whole economy behind, based on like collecting data and selling data for advertising and transactional things. And the value that is extracted from the user data is only captured by single companies. It doesn't go back to the people who contribute to build that web, the government, or any other entity, even not media. So people complain that it's hard to build a business model where whole value goes to just the platform itself to build something better. So Web3 is positioning itself with the promise at the core that it's built on user owning their own data, using their own, starting with the way they sign in into websites. Web wallets are the main point of signing in into the Web3 based application services and website. And the data you own is actually, you carry it into your wallet that hold your access with your private key to entries into a public ledger, public online database, which is a blockchain, to put things simpler. I hope I was generic enough. Resh, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing, explanation of the differences. I would say that one of the interesting things that Web3 is bringing us, again, to reconfirm, I think really is the ownership, but also in addition to that, I think you're going to see a lot of non-human kind of interaction there. Bots. You're going to see, because we have a more trustless system. You're going to be able to interact with entities like DAOs. There's going to be a lot more, incorporation of AI and machine learning into those systems. So I think the decentralization of ownership brings a lot of other components there that we're going to see evolve in the advantages of Web3 over Web 2. I think we had interoperability in Web 2 in certain ways, but as Sebastian said, the ownership and then these other technologies that provide that trustless ecosystem on the blockchain is going to really enable us to do so much more together as communities, but also, even as an individual, being able to interact with, entities that we can have that authenticity of relationship, even if they're not, human per se. They could be, all different types of structures.
Okay, so let's recap here. We've touched on the metaverse being this virtual environment, this virtual 3D environment that's much more interactive and immersive, that lets users enter and participate in a new type of world. And predominantly, the superior version of these meta worlds is driven by Web3 infrastructure, which basically means that the user owns and controls the content. And because they own and control the content, they can move from one meta world to another with their virtual content. So if we were to think of St. Vincent, for example, announcing they're doing their carnival or they would like to do a carnival in the metaverse. If we think about a carnival costume, I could have a 3D designer like we're seeing out of Trinidad. A young lady named Anya Ayung-Chi has designed this incredible 3D outfit for them, which is called an NFT, a non-fungible token. And basically, she can take this avatar of her carnival costume, wear it in Superworld, and similarly take it out of Superworld and go and access Sandbox and wear it there as well. So that's a pretty interesting evolution of what we're seeing from internet communication and connectivity. But it goes back to a key point here, which has been touched on quite a bit, and it's why blockchain. Why are we using blockchain for all of this? I mean, surely you look at groups like Second Life, Facebook's Meta, Roblox, Microsoft, all these various players entering the industry. But why is it that you gentlemen are speaking about blockchain as a component in this particular event?
Well, So far, like we mentioned, like there's only two ways to store information. Either you store it into private centralized owned databases operated by private companies, and that's what we've seen so far, like by most of the platform we interact and part in Web2, or you rely on a technology that has enabled like information to be stored in a distributed manner, and that has been providing so far enough confidence and trust level because it's backed by technology itself and a number of computers in a large network that makes it not impossible, but probably hard to attack and change information into the network. And that technology so far, and maybe will be another one in a decade, two or more, but so far blockchain has proven that it is efficient and it can already be used for various applications, including cryptocurrencies and the finance system. So in a broader scale, NFTs represent any sort of digital assets, can be like art, music, video, game items, virtual lands, avatars. And NFTs are actually records on the blockchain that provide the proof of ownership, the proof of authorship, who made it, the proof of scarcity, digital scarcity, and that is a great application for what we are looking to achieve, which is to ensure that indeed that information is public, transparent, can be trusted, and it cannot be modified or altered by a third party.
Okay, so if I could ask something that I think is on everyone's mind. Currently, the metaverses we're seeing are the polygons or the fidelity is very low at the moment, and it's more akin to a cartoonish / animated type experience. Can you explain why that is and what we could expect for the future? Is this the way things will always be? Are we always going to expect that the metaverse and our experiences would be that of a cartoon character?
All right, I can start, and you can see some of those examples. Cartoon, we call them voxel 3D characters. Well, because we are evolving in the virtual world, I think we can let our imagination like go and dream bigger than necessarily what we are seeing into the physical world. So we can create content and experience that definitely go beyond the laws of physics, beyond our imagination. And we are not necessarily attached to only try to represent with the highest fidelity, like the traditional world, like trying to create like meta-human or high-def capture. The second thing is like the computing power and cost of storing data to actually make high-definition capture of almost realistic, photorealistic humans. It's still very high as of today. Plus, it will require, so it's expensive, it's long to capture, and it will require very high-end devices on the user side to actually render that. Like you can do that on PlayStation 5 and other hardware, but not on any device. So at the moment, to scale fast in both content production and adoption and rendering, we found that a simplified aesthetic representation that's still that's very gamified actually for Sandbox is not the only representation possible, but it's one that is compelling, that allows enough creativity behind for everyone. And so far, brands, companies, creators are liking it enough to engage into this world and propose a new sort of experiences.
Yeah, I think that to Sebastian's point, the technology is definitely still evolving, and as we go through that evolution, at least what we're thinking about at Superworld is how do we again adopt kind of what the latest technologies are out there and keep doing that as technology gets better. There's been a number of inflection points on the technology side over the past 5 to 10 years that we've kind of seen that have enabled what we have now, right? Whether it's mobile, 5G, AR, VR software, the hardware with headsets, and what's possible in terms of accessing all this content, as Sebastian said, that's going to evolve. And so as it evolves, the quality of and the resolution of what you're seeing is going to improve. And the ability to provide that high resolution is going to improve in terms of what can be accessed to the end device. In terms of our vision at Superworld, it's really about reality. And so, to get to that level takes some time in terms of all the technology that's really behind that. But I think, ultimately, I think our goal, and I think all of our goals, is really to provide tools for anyone to achieve whatever they want to see and do, right? Whether that is a high res type of environment, or even something that's a bit more animated, or a bit more stylistic. So everything is possible, and that's what I'm excited about.
And I think this was you, Sebastian, that had said this at one of your answers, where smaller nations and developing nations in the metaverse have an equal footing or at parity with large nations, basically meaning that the playing field has been leveled. And I think that's a very interesting point, specifically because today we're hosted by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the Government of Barbados. And one of the key things that we're looking at from the position of this technology is how can this enable economic growth? How can this better the lives of the average Caribbean person? How could the young entrepreneur utilize this environment to advance themselves and advance their businesses? And if I could bring it to a more contextual position here that's relative to our audience, let me throw out something to both of you, and I'd like both of your answers on this. It's, what do you think the average Caribbean person can expect out of these platforms in the medium and long term? And why should they even care? Haresh, you can kick it off first if you feel comfortable.
Sure. I think that the beauty of what Barbados has done, as well as all the other organizations in support of the initiatives here, like the CTU, and we're working with the Caribbean Disaster Management Association in the Caribbean and the World Bank, and there's a variety of organizations here that have really shown leadership, and again, the community, the citizens of Barbados. That is the reason that we're doing this, is to provide services to them at the highest levels. And I think that the promise of being innovative, sometimes it can be risky because you're taking that leadership role. But the benefits of that are, first of all, you're learning about how those technologies are being adapted at the forefront, at the frontier of what anyone is doing in the world. And that really, again, takes a lot of leadership and insight and bravery, but that will pay off because the citizens will understand how to start interfacing with those technologies, whether it's blockchain or Web3, or whether it's AR or VR. Once you start providing the exposure, especially to the younger population, who are already benefiting from this in school, either in computer science courses, they're already having that exposure so to see it from the top, to see it from someone like yourself, Ambassador, who's helping, the leaders of your country who are helping kind of promote this, really gives a lot of people inspiration. And that's what I'm really excited about and proud about. And, again, as the technologies evolve, the ways that citizenry can get involved with blockchain, can get involved with these other immersive technologies, is only going to get better. So to take a start and do that, that's the first step. And that's what's very exciting to me as a country. So thank you for what you guys are doing in this space and the leadership you're providing.
You're welcome. And it's quite a interesting point you raise, is that, and I share this opinion with you, is that the education and the learning in the early is so critical. I could only think about what the region would look like today if majority of the population was exposed at a high level to what the internet was in the early 1990s. When I think about that from a concept position, I think, wow, we could have really have been the pioneers of the new types of businesses. Maybe Amazon or Microsoft or Instagram could have been founded in Trinidad or Antigua or Barbados. And it's really, you know, I think the jury's still out in what the possibilities of the next generation of businesses are going to be in the metaverse. I think where we are is still extremely early in the metaverse. So I do appreciate your point, Haresh. Sebastian, why should the Caribbean people care about the metaverse? Or people in general, for that matter?
Yes. Well, the first thing is like through events like today, we get to talk about this topic, which you might or might not have been much exposed before. So at least it's raising awareness about the possibilities and opportunities beyond. The world, in my opinion, is going beyond borders, specifically into this digital world. And the kind of skills you need to start building or accessing the metaverse, those are probably not yet skills that you would be taught at schools anywhere in the world, and by the way, and not specifically only in the Caribbean, but yet, like anyone from anywhere in the world can access those and can become a new leader in the space. So the earlier you're positioning yourself and you're helping to support like that next generation of builder, of architect, of fashion designers, and people who can also influence the rest of the metaverse through their culture, for their heritage, for their values they care about, as we initially introduced, I think it's interesting. And we are already collaborating with a certain number of like initiative in the space, like Ministry of Culture, etc., to bring on the local ethnic culture toward the world. We've done that in Korea. We have initiative in Philippines, and I think like the culture of Caribbean is one that's worth promoting and also ensuring in perpetuity through the metaverse to have an even richer global scale and reach. And if you can generate a revenue as well from those activities, that's an even better incentive overall for motivating, engaging, and positioning yourself into this new realm.
Wow. So what's interesting about what you said was you're absolutely right. The Caribbean is so rich in culture, and we have such a diverse talent pool in that vein. You know, we have some amazing artists and musicians and just people of great content creation. So the metaverse becomes this container where I can enter it and represent my creations in a new way to attract a global market, and hopefully in some cases even foreign exchange just beyond eyeballs. And now look, I don't think I've done service to both yourself, Sebastian, and Haresh. You know, you two are pioneers in the industry. So I should have probably have started off with this, and forgive me for not. But why don't you spend 30 seconds to a minute each telling us about what you guys are doing, what your platform represents, and then we'll take some questions from the audience, which I'll ask Michelle from the CTU to tee up. So before Michelle does that, Sebastian, why don't you go first? Because, you know, Sandbox is absolutely one of the leading players right now. You guys have done so well in the market in terms of what you've brought to the industry, the type of performance that you've been able to put out there in terms of the platform development, the type of excitement and hype around the metaverse is in part because of the work you're doing. Let's hear from you on what's going on there, and what is Sandbox, why should we care, and how does the average person in the Caribbean get access to your platform, and what should they do next?
So Sandbox, it's essentially this gaming virtual world where creators and players can earn a revenue from the free asset and free experience they make through the use of NFTs and blockchain technology. We've been a long-term player in one of the pioneers in blockchain, and we have 10 years of experience in gaming before, so really catering toward user-generated content. And we also work to bring on some of the world's largest brands onto our platform to reach out to over 1 billion people through them, including IPs and like like The Walking Dead, Care Bear, Smurf, music artists like Snoop Dogg, like deadmau5, like Steve Aoki, brands like Adidas, and more recently announced Warner Music Group, typically. So also putting an emphasis on like how gaming we can start with gaming, but how we can reach beyond into like broader entertainment and cultural diversity through gaming. So far to date, Sandbox counts more than about 19,000 unique landowners, about 2 million registered wallets, and it keeps growing rapidly. And we're definitely seeing like 2022 as the year on our roadmap for enabling landowners to publish their experience and really kicking off the whole open metaverse for everyone.
Amazing. And hopefully some of us get to buy some land next to Snoop Dogg, because I understand he's one of your landowners. It's very interesting. Suresh, you know, you've built a platform that you yourself have said brings the reality of the world to that virtual experience. And you're no stranger to the Caribbean. You've touched on it. You worked with the Disaster Recovery Agency, and you've put out an amazing NFT, of which I bought one to support the disaster recovery efforts. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about Superworld and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, thanks again, and thanks again for having us. And it's a pleasure to be here with your audience. You know, I think what really inspired you know, our team and myself to build Superworld, and what our mission is our mission is focused on how do we enhance people's real lives, and you know, how do we leverage these technologies, AR, VR, blockchain, AI, to again collectively build a better world. How do we again collectively take all these activities and do something very positive for the world? I think it's a good time for that. So you know, I think that is our mission at Superworld. And so what Superworld is a virtual world mapped on top of the real world. So everything in Superworld is around us. We're in it right now. So, you know, again, you know, you have a world, I have a world, the government of Barbados has a world, brands have worlds. These are all filters on the real world. So the first way I describe that is I use an example of Pokemon Go, which is that game where you run around and look for digital information. And that's you know, again, an analogy, but what we're saying is that anyone has the ability to create anything. On the data side, what we want to do is, again, use that collective data to empower people. So again, we call it live to earn. You know, a little bit play on the play to earn, which is an amazing thing that's really been an innovation in the market. But we call it live to earn. How do we take these tokenomics mechanisms and apply them to real life activities and people's passions? And then how do we also do that to benefit the world? Things like we're doing with the World Bank and the Caribbean Disaster Management Association, planting trees around the world. There's a lot of things that we can do that are very beneficial. And then the third part of Superworld is monopoly. That's the analogy. We've divided the surface of the earth into 64 billion plots of land. Each plot is a unique digital asset. It's an NFT. And if you buy a plot of land, you become a key stakeholder on the platform. So anyone in the world can become a key stakeholder by owning land in Superworld and then creating anywhere. But you know, it's important to be emphasized. You don't have to own land. You don't have to, come into Superworld that way. You can create content, you can create NFTs, and in the future, you'll be able to create DAOs. We're launching a token. So what we want to do at Superworld, again, is bring all these technologies to people's real life and the things that they're concerned with in their real life. And so for that, I think a lot of people say we could serve as a gateway to the metaverse, gateway to other virtual worlds, a gateway to other platforms. And that's kind of what we're trying to do in terms of our differentiation in the market, is really, again, focus on the real life and the real world.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Paresh. And you guys are doing some awesome stuff. And you know, I'm so grateful that two superstars from the metaverse space were able to come today. And I have a million more questions that I would love to ask you for the benefit of the audience. How do you buy virtual land? Why should you buy virtual land? What is virtual land? And there's a million more questions to go with that. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of an all-day session. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it to Michelle from the CTU to bring up some questions from our audience. And I'm hoping you gentlemen would oblige and answer those questions. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Abed, and thank you to our speakers, Rish and Sebastian. Now, as you said, Ambassador, there are a million questions. Our participants are flooding the Q&A panel. And you know, you mentioned something, you said that starting is the first step. And it's really early to start at this point, to start off in the metaverse. So our next question is about starting. How do you start? And whether $10,000 US, of course, whether you can buy an opportunity in the metaverse, whether you can start off in the metaverse, $10,000 US.
So I think like there's many ways to start to interact and engage with the metaverse. And there is a misconception that you can only access it if you own land. That's actually not true. You can start engaging with the metaverse without making any single purchase, without any requirement other than your time and your skills. For example, you can start downloading for free all the creation tools, like tools to create 3D assets in Sandbox called Vox Edit, or the Game Maker that is no code. And you can build experiences and leverage your skills, shock them across social networks, Twitter, Discord, engage with the community until people will want to hire you to build it for their own land, for example. And through the actual revenue you'll generate from providing your services, you can then decide to acquire land or buy asset or just get it back to as fiat or any other cryptocurrency for other purposes. This is just one example, and we've seen that as one of the main entry points in our community. There are ways to engage just as play to earn, being present during events, during alpha season, and so on. Just there is 166, 164 lands, and that's it in Sandbox. So it's a very small number, ultimately, if we compare it to like human population. So it's not every human is meant to own land into the metaverse. However, I believe there is an opportunity for every human to build in it, to engage with it, to spend time with it, to live a part of his life in it.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, again, especially, you know, how we think of Superworld as well, you know, there's no requirement to buy land. Those that understand what our vision is, you know, we want to make sure that land is accessible. So, you know, there's about 64 billion plots of land, each one unpurchased is 0.1 ether. So about, you know, $250 if someone does want to do that. However, you know, again, everything is free. You can utilize your mobile phone and add content straight from your camera roll, photos, videos, audio. You can upload 3D objects. You know, our goal on the NFT side, again, you can create NFTs. That's free to do as well. We're looking on doing other integrations with Solana and Polygon, which are ways that, you know, buyers can also avoid high gas charges. So again, we want to try to make this as seamless as possible in a variety of ways. You know, I'd say the other really important thing is as the technology evolves, there's going to be more ways to get involved. I think what, DeFi is a very interesting area that a lot of, people that have been into crypto for a while have now really been engaged with. I think there's a lot of new crypto people that would be very interested in accessing the financial markets, utilizing decentralized finance. I think DAO structures, coming together as communities, utilizing blockchain to do that and raise capital, or other structures that people can utilize to get involved. As this technology evolves even more, I'm excited because I think accessibility is our goal. And we want to make sure that this is an inclusive metaverse. That's what we're focused on for everyone. And so I'm very accessible. So if people want to ask me, how to get involved, I'm at CEO@superworldapp.com. Would love to talk to you if you have ideas. We love the Caribbean, and very, very open to citizens and partners that want to get involved here.
Michelle, I do want to give a brief perspective on that, because I do realize that a lot of persons are concerned that the metaverse is this garden wall where you have to pay to play. And I do have to express that the only thing you need, as Sebastian noted, is your time and your skills. Once you have a device, a computer, a smartphone, whatever you're watching this very presentation on, you can utilize it to access these worlds and participate as a character in them, and start offering some level of service once you feel you have a grasp of that. And you yourself can actually start earning a revenue as a participant in this new world. So it's not necessary that there's a need for investment, and I would probably advise those listening to not do that until they have understood, they have learned, they have played around, they have figured their way out. That's probably the last thing I would do. I would start the learning campaign first. But back over to you, Michelle.
Thank you for untying that Gordian knot, Ambassador. So my next question, when talking about NFTs, we constantly hear the term ownership. The fact that the space is not regulated does not prove that you don't really own an NFT, as legally there's nothing there to support you. Ordinary legal contracts are just as good, and in fact better, since they're heavily regulated. The legal side of things.
I would say that these are two different perspectives. Like, we call smart contract over a blockchain because they can be actually executed directly by code, by technology, which is in my opinion, still the best way to ensure a contract, a promise over something is actually being delivered in the fastest and smoothest manner. So just like legal and law doesn't work at the same speed as technology. So when you make a purchase, you actually effectively receive in return a token that actually sit on this blockchain, and that are already in its code embedded that you typically own that asset, and what kind of rights and permission level you can do with those tokens. So from a high level perspective, the ballpark of the most common use cases needed by users and businesses are already set in the blockchain. And it doesn't require a lot of human time, talk, lawyer with fees, consultation, etc., to diverge and study exception and other case study. So I think it's definitely providing a greater level of simplification and accessibility to broader audience through that, to define what can be permitted to be done or not through the use of those tokenized digital assets. And smart contract can register and regulate much more than actually just digital asset ownership. Behind, they can define how they can be used onto a certain application and platform, how they can be maybe gearing toward also the finance system and decentralized system, like how you can fractionalize them, rent them, earn a revenue, loan, take a loan against them, for example, and many other use cases that are being built, leveraging those assets and the technology.
Should I answer?
Oh,
Yeah, I think just totally agree with everything that Sebastian said. Very well said. I would say on a high level here, I think the promise of NFTs is the ability to, again, have that authenticity, the ownership, being able to, again, have an ROI, a return for all the time spent in virtual worlds, in platforms, and to have that very direct, D2C, direct to consumer, direct to customer type relationship. So you can go, again, whether you're making music or art, you don't have to deal with centralized platforms. You can have a greater share of the revenue that you're creating, and you can have a very direct relationship with your followers and fans and your customers. And I think that is the benefit of utilizing these structures. And as smart contracts and the technology improves, we're going to see how that relationship evolves. And we've seen it already. I've mentioned a few of these different structures, but I think those are all going to come into play to really empower and benefit creators of all types.
Do you want to jump in here, or shall I go and move on to the next question?
Please, the next question. I would only say that the difference between a legal contract and that of a smart contract on the blockchain is in one aspect you're trusting law, in the other aspect you're trusting code. One is mathematically proved, and the other one's upheld by an economy's legal system. And both serve a purpose. And the key thing about NFTs is that when you're buying the production of an artist, it's being validated as the real McCoy, and the blockchain assists with that. So if you don't trust the work generated by the artist, then it's obviously something where it starts to question the authenticity of the work. But please move on, Michelle.
Thank you, Ambassador. For clarification, and on to our next question: how will the issue of interoperability standards for different metaverses connecting to each other be dealt with?
I can go. I think that as the technology again evolves, we're looking at a variety of bridges, ways that NFTs, which is again the core of the fundamental building block of, I think, how we're going to see these virtual worlds really come together. Again, the example was given earlier that if you own an NFT in one virtual world, let's say on Ethereum, you're going to be able to, again, have the ability to transport that across other virtual worlds. And if you're talking about other, protocols like Solana, other layer 2 type solutions like Polygon and others out there in the market, all of these improvements in the technology are enabling a variety of things, whether increasing the seamlessness of transactions by lowering friction like gas costs, or improving processing speeds. This technology is evolving, and interoperability is coming very fast. And so we have, again, a lot of reasons why we want to add value to customers, our customers who, again, want to utilize a variety of virtual worlds out there, want to utilize a lot of platforms, and want to be able to take the assets that they're building to and from all of these worlds. And so this is the interoperability challenges that we're currently facing can be, I think, equated to when we used to have to dial up to the internet, right? Back in the mid 90s, which again, we solved that fairly quickly. And, with a lot of the investment going into these solutions, I would say we're not very far off from that becoming a reality. And we're very excited about that, because that's what customers want. And that's when you're going to see a lot of adoption here, where if you're building in Web 2 and you don't have that interoperability, you're not able to, again, as a customer, as a community member, get the true value of all the work that you're putting in.
Thank you, Rish. I think we had a question from Nigel Castillo, who's the Deputy Secretary General of the CTU. Nigel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I was actually just planning to intervene to draw your attention to that same question that you just asked about interoperability. And maybe I'll add a little nuance to it and ask, is there any infrastructural institutions that are forming or evolving to deal specifically with this issue of interoperability? Because you have a lot of players. What brings them together? Is there any infrastructure that's evolving to ensure that we have interoperability going forward? Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess that was a hard question.
Yeah, well, I can touch on it. I didn't know. I'll give you my thoughts on it. I think that, for one, Sebastian and I, Dirk from Upland, others are coming together. And there's a number of, again, players in this market that really want this to happen. Amomg is a really great example of this. They're very supportive of the overall market and ecosystem. I think YAT is a great promoter of what everyone here in the market is doing. And I think for us, collectively, formally and informally, we're coming together to talk about these issues. So how we can work together to integrate, to again provide mechanisms on the technology side within our virtual worlds to bring the ability for our customers in each one of these worlds to come together. And we're doing it. I mean, even at Superworld right now, we've done partnership with Super Rare, which is another NFT marketplace. They added their NFTs into Superworld at Miami Art Week about 2 months ago, put NFTs in real world environments. And so there are workarounds right now, even before this becomes totally seamless. And so I would say, it's the fact that the leaders and founders and the communities that are coming together are really in support of this, that we're really also coming together to figure out what the solutions are. So informally and formally, I'm very excited about how these organizations and leaders in the space are working together.
I think I like to what Hrish said, like on a more a practical perspective. It's true, like interoperability is a possibility, but it requires certain efforts to be actually deployed. Like it's not because an asset can be utilized across different applications that it has an immediate utility across any application. So that means that there needs to be a balance of incentive between, like, should I, as an application developer, a platform or service provider, provide a utility for that asset on my platform? And if so, why would I do that? Main answer usually is like, I would do that because I want to attract the users who own those assets onto my platform. So it becomes a new perspective into user acquisition. Doing user acquisition through content production, in my opinion, is more valuable than doing user acquisition by spending it onto platforms, advertising platform in the traditional Web 2.0. It's also a way to support creativity because you have more freedom toward like who gets to decide if you can add like content and utility over asset to become interoperable. It doesn't need to be only the Web3 platform operator. It can be communities. One concrete example is MeBits. MeBits is a collection of 3D characters that was launched by the same team as the CryptoPunks, one of the most popular NFT collection. And MeBits, they had like this MeBits DAO, which came as like a community organized governance structure as a DAO that started to work and implement MeBits character to become available. And why they are doing that is because they believe the MeBits should be accessible broadly in a broad manner. So it's also shifting. I think interoperability is shifting the decision power and the workforce requirement from one single actor to multiple. And I think it's essentially also the essence of like Web3, like doing things in a decentralized manner, distributing the workload, distributing the revenue, distributing the value, distributing the decision across all the actors who want to take part in those projects.
Sorry, allow me, please. Just following on from Nigel's question, and we just have about 5 minutes left for this very interesting and engaging discussion, and then we have to move to panel 2. But I think, you know, from where we sit, we advise governments and so on, and we know within the global structure for telecommunications, there's the International Telecommunications Union. For the internet, there's the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. There's the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force, run by the Internet Society. And there are these global structures that, you know, set standards, advise on policy and so on for governments. And this new metaverse, and I think it's sort of related to what Nigel was asking. Do you see the need for this sort of global governance structure, or would you rather government step back from this global sort of regulation and standards and policies and allow the technologies to evolve, and then we can, you know, put this global regulatory framework in place?
You know, I think that regulation in some ways can help people feel more safety in terms of engaging with certain assets like NFTs or with crypto in general. But at the same time, you know, it definitely needs to be done in a way that promotes innovation, that, you know, enhances the ability for entrepreneurs and founders to create solutions to problems. You know, I think that, you know, all of us in the space, the communities that are so excited about this, you know, first and foremost are interested in improving the world and you know, providing better opportunities, whether it's in entertainment or education or you know, in terms of accessibility, communication. There's a lot of things that I think we're all excited about. And so I think that doing it in a way that really fosters the creativity and fosters the ability for founders to build and continue to build, you know, I think is very important. I would say that there are certain frameworks and benefits of having structures in place that allows us to operate in ways that can enable us to build in a more, I would say, you know, in a way that allows us to really utilize all of the resources available to us, whether that's investment capital, whether that's bringing together people in communities because there's that trust. And so I think it goes hand in hand. I think, you know, I'm a big believer in stakeholder capitalism, where we all have to work together, governments, not-for-profits, you know, private corporations, communities. I think we all make it happen. And so I'm in favor of doing that in a very balanced way.
Great, thanks. We're really short on time now, and it's been very engaging, but I'm going to ask Ambassador Abed just to give a few closing comments, so we can kind of change gears a bit and look at some other sort of issues, the opportunities, challenges, and risks around this metaverse. But moving away from the tech side to look at sort of almost like the economic opportunity.
Well, I think today's session really touched on a lot of the high-level concepts of what the metaverse is and and what the key drivers behind it, such as blockchain technology, non-fungible tokens. And we heard from two of the leading platforms in the industry why this stuff matters. And the reality is, for the Caribbean audience, the jury is still out whether the metaverse is going to truly be the future or if it's a passing fad. From what we can see right now, there's evidently a lot of economic activity, a lot of opportunities happening. It's clearly becoming something that we need to pay attention to. And it's very important that the key principle of education is taken home by everyone listening right now, to understand what this is and to get involved in some aspect while basically just exploring, because this does very well present a new position for people in the region to find work, to find opportunities, to become the next generation of business leaders, to build the next generation of platforms or even offerings on the very same platforms we heard from today. So with that being said, thank you to our panelists for joining us. We enjoyed thoroughly hearing from each of you. And thank you, Michelle and Rodney, for hosting us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's been a great conversation, and hope it brought some interest in the space and hopefully future vocation and more jobs.
Clarity, and hopefully we see more Caribbean persons joining the metaverse. Thank you for this session.
Thank you.
We now proceed to theme 2 on the economic opportunities and risk of the metaverse. This theme, and as Ambassador said, the metaverse provides economic opportunities. So we will examine the economic, social, and cultural opportunities for different stakeholders, including governments and the private sector. So I now introduce Mr. Vladimir Radimovich, who is the Director of E-Diplomacy and Cybersecurity Programs of the Diplo Foundation in Geneva. And he will be speaking on bundling metaverse policy changes. Mr. Radimovich, Vladimir, are you there with us?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. I hope you can hear me. That's the usual greetings. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see me. And it's pity I'm not with you somewhere in the Caribbean currently. But first of all, the congratulations definitely for this to the CTU for initializing this discussion. I've already enjoyed discussing what metaverse is or could be in the first session, and maybe as a small provocation on whether we have one metaverse or more. The question is, would you use a capital M or a small m when you talk about metaverse? Let it stay open. Rodney already got me at the very beginning of his introduction with the suggestion of working from the Caribbean beaches with local people without snow. I come from the part of the world where actually snow was around just a few days ago in Belgrade in Serbia. Not that I don't like snow, but I would like to fly into Caribbean at the very second. I remember I'm of that generation of the Second Life, which was mentioned before, when we in Diplo, we actually had a diplomacy island over there with a museum of diplomacy and the first virtual embassy, or the first, I don't know whether we could have called it metaverse, but let's say a Second Life embassy. It was actually the Maldives, with the beach and sun and sand. So there is something in this environment. Now, I know that this session and particularly the upcoming panel will address a lot of opportunities when it comes to metaverse, and there'll be many discussions about that. What it can bring, but often we don't observe the societal challenges, if you wish. The new technologies, we usually see the problems when they appear. We don't necessarily look ahead. And at the same time, it's the same with digitalization. We usually think about security, privacy, all of these questions once we have done the digitalization. And the policy actually needs to follow innovation hand in hand. Those are the two sides of the same coin. So allow me to play a little bit on the dark side, if you wish, for the next 10, 15 minutes. By no means discouraging innovation and metaverse, but doing it in a way that society and humanity can think in advance of what the impact, the social impact of new technologies could be, so that we approach this innovation in a smart way. Now, why am I cautious? First of all, metaverse, and we already started with that, it is built on a technology which we now know as internet, which is already full of societal problems. Again, it is amazing technology. We've never ever had anything like that in history, but we seem to be missing how we should be using it today, more for the education, less for disinformation and stuff. So we are already building a new technology on the basics of something which is humanity-wise, society-wise, quite on a shaky ground. If we look under the bonnet of the metaverse, if we open the bonnet, what we see is, first of all, the internet, that is existing technology, again, whether it's with small I or capital I. So the internet, where we have the telecommunications as underground, we have the servers and the content and all of that, or protocols, and then we have the social networks as a background. All of them have a lot of open internet governance, digital policy questions, societal questions, which we are still hardly grappling with. But on top of that, and there was a lot of discussion in the previous panel, which I think is the key of this discussion about metaverse, which we usually see, as a 3D world, but it's much more than that, as your previous speaker said. So you have a bunch of technologies which are going to be concepts, which are going to be used there. Augmented reality, virtual reality brings a lot of questions. I'll mention some when it comes to the impact on society and policy questions. Biotechnology, with haptic feelings, with neural connections, brain-to-computer interfaces, integrated augmented reality to lenses and so on. Artificial intelligence, which will definitely help in automatization of the virtual environments. Quantum computing to allow the faster processing power. 5G, 6G, 7G, whatever, satellites for bandwidth, for connectivity. Web 3.0, which was very well mentioned when it comes to crypto assets, decentralized finances, generally decentralized approach. There is a number of questions we have to respond to while we innovate rather than after, and it grows exponentially. And the tech and governments and communities should actually sit down now. And I like what Krish mentioned, the stakeholder capitalism, whatever we put it, but basically working together already to address the challenges that can emerge once we run the technology. So in this part, I want to open this Pandora box of questions and really just scratch the surface, provoke you, if you wish, on some of the questions we'll need to address in the future. And maybe that's a suggestion for the CTU to actually organize a series of discussions on each of those blocks of questions that we disentangle it further. Let's start with infrastructure. So we mentioned the bandwidth and the 6G, 7G, whatever we'll need for that. Standards, there was a lot of discussion about standards already. I think the key question that was raised by Nigel and Rodney before is where these standards are going to be set. Now, there was a comparison with the early days of the internet where actually the standards somehow came up. It was the economic market take up on the standards. Today, we have a huge geopolitical battle around standards. And you can see it if you follow the ITU, ICANN, wherever you move, there's more and more geopolitical pressure. It's not going to be like in the early days of the internet. So I'm not sure we can actually avoid governments being there. I don't know whether we should have them or not, but that's a reality. So this is a really, really important question. The next question is centralized or decentralized. No matter how much we might want to push for decentralized, and obviously not all the companies might want that, there's a huge question of servers and hosting, and whether decentralized is actually decentralized, or it's just the up level which is decentralized, and actually the infrastructure is still centralized in some servers by some companies. The questions about data localization, sovereignty, the states are increasing demands for sovereignty over data. Now, the question is, the data is not just personal data. It's also data about the environment. Let's say that the virtual apartment that I'm in, the birds that are singing around, whose are the birds? So it's going to be very interesting. Then if you look at development, which is particularly important for the Caribbean, it is not about the VR headsets. Metaverse is, as you discussed, much more than that. And the good question that I want to provoke is whether there is a playing field, whether that playing field has been leveled, actually, between the developed and developing countries. I'm not so sure necessarily, because the question is, if we, and I come from developing country as well, if we want to be followers and consumers, that's fine. and we are on equal footing. But if we want to be trendsetters and creators, then there is much more that we need to do in order to enable us. And you mentioned education, capacity building. Definitely, that's something that we need to have if we want to really have that equal or leveled playing field, right? Let's move to market and economy. One question is of the monopoly and antitrust. Now, we see a lot of problems when it comes to social media and platforms today, antitrust lawsuits around the world. And if Metaverse is going to be built on the same basis, then we might have the same or even bigger problem that we currently have. So that's a big question to ask. Then the regulatory questions in the new era, like how do you regulate and do you? The blockchain, NFTs, from taxes to ownership, money laundering, labor laws. What is labor in virtual world, right? How do you actually add value and so on? Let's move to identity questions, and identity will be the key, I guess. And you mentioned already, the point is that you have your avatar, your identity, which you can shift back and forth through the metaverse components, if you wish. And the NVIDIA CEO mentioned that avatar belongs to you and is you. Now, how do you prove your own identity? Does it mean there will be no anonymity because you will have to register every time you and link your real identity with space? That's a huge debate in cyberspace currently. We are going to take it over to metaverse even more. How about the AI? There'll be a lot of AI which is interacting with you in the metaverse. Do we know whether we are speaking to a human? Do we need to use a Turing test and capture codes every time? Can we trust who's behind the avatar, right? Now, who is responsible for misdeeds by the avatar? A company, a person, AI, and so on. Let's move on. Intellectual property. The design is the key in the new world, right? There'll be more and more about the design and intellectual property. So there are a lot of questions about the intellectual property rights, and also about the AI creations. How do we deal with AI creations in that world? Security, and again, scratching the surface. Ransomware, where we have concerns of locking our self-driving cars. Just imagine locking the entire virtual reality where we are actually doing businesses, living, having families, whatever. Altering the reality, and that is the huge question, about deepfake, right? And is when someone artificially changes the video that it looks like someone else is speaking. Now, just imagine in augmented reality or virtual reality world, when someone starts hacking or doing fakes, right, of the identities. And by the way, for those of you that have not watched, you can watch the Hollywood blockbuster, but it's a really good plot, Anon, like Anonymous, Anon. When this happens, just as an idea, right? Then the harassment and violence in the metaverse against the avatars. How do you treat it? What is the legal effect of violence against an avatar? Is it the same or not? Warfare. I'm not going to even go into that. We have many open questions about how international law applies to cyberspace. What is armed attack? How can a state respond to an armed attack? What is armament? How do we attribute attacks? Now imagine that in metaverse. Well, I hope it's going to end up as a game of shooting instead of shooting in the real world, but that would be good. But I'm not so confident. Then a bunch of questions about human rights, particularly content policy, where content, again, is not going to be just, what you write or a video that you have, but it's also, again, the virtual houses, the birds, the NFTs, the tokens, all of that is content. Now, content policy and control of the people, content moderation, whether as a censorship, political censorship, or towards combating terrorism or crime, is going to be a huge issue. Privacy, similarly, it's not going to be only about our personal data that we used to have. Now we're going to have biometric location data, because location in virtual world is going to be much easier to spot where you are. Everyday habits, if you spend more and more time in this virtual home or whatever, privacy is going to be a huge issue. Safety and health, addiction, psychological effects of being in the virtual world where time flies faster than in reality. And then geopolitics. You already have huge competition between the big parties like the US and China, Metaverse versus Tencent or Meta versus Tencent and so on. Other countries, not least Caribbean, jumping into playing with the Metaverse, like Barbados, first Metaverse Embassy, and then we have Seoul and Shanghai in the Metaverse and so on. A lot of questions about governance. So what is the role of the states comparing to the big technology? Will big technology again be dominant and even become bigger than what we have now? Or it can actually change if we get to some sort of a decentralized world. You mentioned governance through code, smart contracts, this difference or interplay between code and the law. Now, who sets the code? It's again the humans, right? Or the AI, which is fed in by the humans. How far can we go towards the governance by code? Do we want it? And Ambassador Abed mentioned that. So that's really a crucial question. And then finally, I think this is a very important part which will become more and more relevant, is the question of humanity and even philosophy, if you wish. So as we have a digital and human embodiment more together, we'll have questions like ethics, theology, anthropology. How can one be present simultaneously in various spaces? Now, it's already a problem with the Zoom, but it might be less of a problem in Metaverse. Ethical questions about AI, about biotechnology, about connecting our brains together, which will come in 20, 30 years, it doesn't matter. Then what is our real identity as a person? You know, which identity philosophically I have then if I have multiplicity of identities and worlds? And what is the value added to the humanity by each one of us? What is our role if we just sit and create something? And what do we create? A lot of questions. And I'll wrap it up here with I hope I didn't scare too much. There is a risk that someone raised that we might end up in a matrix. We could possibly do so, but I guess we won't. It really depends, as Harari would say, this is one option, but it really depends on whether we start thinking about the society and policy already at the same time while we innovate. And we in Diplo will definitely cover this metaverse and interplay with digital policy more prominently, both through training programs and the Digital Watch Observatory. I'll share the link later on. And I hope for even more interesting cooperation with the CTU in future. I'll shut up now and back to you, and looking forward to great discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Vlada. As always, thanks for that global perspective. I hope you can stick around for a little bit, because very much what you presented is linked to the opportunities. Opportunities sometimes are often overstated. Risk and challenges are real, but I think the opportunities are also real, I must say. And on that note, I really want to thank you for your presentation, and hope you can stick around for the Q&A. But I want Michelle now to introduce the next moderator and the next panel.
So we now proceed to the panel discussion moderated by Dr. Annalie Babb, well-known ICT consultant in the region from Barbados. She will be joined by Mr. Lester Garcia, who is my namesake. He is the head of connectivity policy at Latin America for Meta. We also have Professor Avinash Prasad, who is the chairman of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy. And finally, Mr. Alan Emtaj, computer scientist from Barbados. Mr. Emtaj is the creator of the first internet search engine. So our panelists, we welcome you today to our session.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Rodney, thank you. Thanks to the CTU for having us all. I think my job today is very simple, because I'm just keeping our wonderful panelists to time, I believe. But before we begin, I'd like to congratulate the Government of Barbados in particular and the CTU for this excellent set of presentations and workshop. And if I could just share my screen for one moment. When I was listening to Vladimir, he did a wonderful job of synopsizing all of the different elements and issues that we might want to deal with in respect to this emerging technology and this universe called the metaverse. And I went back to my PhD dissertation, where I talked about a 6-layered access model. And there are issues related to physical access, the infrastructure layer, to financial access, which speaks to equity, to basic access, I call it, which is about the skills, secure access, the safety layer, and policy access. How are we going to regulate all of these different areas? And again, Vladimir gave a wonderful synopsis of the issues involved with that. And then ultimately your content layer, your local innovation, knowledge and content creation. And I think these things are very important. I look forward to the panelists in this session discussing some of these issues, because as I listened to our first session in particular, it came through to me that if the metaverse evolves as we think it might evolve, there are real implications for government, citizens, inclusion, equity, but also issues related to national security. Because what we are essentially doing is creating new worlds. How do governments become involved? How do they manage their citizens and so on? So I look forward to this conversation very much. And I would like to ask our very first panelist, I'd like to begin with Mr. Lester Garcia. And please feel free to go to the Hublio platform and to get the bios of all of our participants and our panelists and so on. So I won't take time to read through, but I just invite Mr. Lester Garcia to begin his own talk or presentation. And please, gentlemen, we'll keep it to 15 minutes, and then we want to leave some time for questions and answers. Lester, please.
Sure, thank you very much. First of all, thanks to the CTU and the Barbados government for putting this together. I think it's a great event and great opportunity to continue the discussions that have been rising around the globe on this metaverse in just the last few months. However, as you have been discussing, as we know, we've been building this for quite some time, transcending from the current internet to the next generation, to the internet 3.0 or the metaverse or whatever we want to call it, but this new generation of interactions and connectivity that we will face with the metaverse. Let me start by sharing my presentation and try to be as fast as possible, as I know that we have limited time. Can you see my screen? Cool.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. So yeah, so let me start. As you know, Meta announced a couple months ago, our CEO and Mark Zuckerberg announced the company focusing now on building this metaverse. And first of all, as I just mentioned a while ago, the metaverse for us is the new internet, new generation of internet. And just as the internet is open, free, and built by all of us, that's what we're envisioning for the metaverse. A discussion like this one, or discussions like this one, where we think, discuss, and present our proposals and our views of what we want this virtual place to be, or this place to be. And I think this will certainly enrich where the way and the place where we will arrive after once this is built, once we get there. So for Meta, the metaverse is connecting these three worlds: the physical world, the world we are in now, of course, with a layer, let's say that way, of further information for our physical world that could be accessible through different devices for individuals, for people. For instance, here, if we see these people traveling through the road, the physical world, of course, is the road per se. Augmented reality would be in their shield screens of their cars and in their cell phones, etc., having this additional information that can be of use for them in their trips. And virtual reality, of course, being in a total different immersive world, however connected and related to the other two. So as I mentioned, our CEO discussed about this and focused the company on having this path towards the metaverse. And what is it for us regarding that particular place? It's a hybrid between social platforms that we see today, but an environment with immersion where people will be able to interact in a more present way, despite the distance and the virtuality. Something that is very important, I think it's part of this discussion as well. It's we are seeing this as a world or a new internet accessible through different computing platforms. Of course, AR/VR devices we were discussing, but also mobile PCs, game consoles, etc. Perhaps we are not seeing yet all the platforms, all the devices that will be available to access the metaverse. So in Meta, we have been working on that, and this is, let's say, our first generation of devices focused on the metaverse, devices and platforms. The portal is it's a device for communication. It was actually very much used and demanded during this pandemic situation. It's a small device that gives extra immersion through a camera, artificial intelligence camera that follows the speaker, and in that regard makes the people in the conversation feel more close. Quest, you all know, is the AR/VR. Quest 2 is actually the new AR/VR device from Meta, and it's our first step into virtual reality. There are already application services being offered through Quest. Spark AR is our augmented reality platform. We are pushing very much creators and people that work through Spark AR to start building the software and the applications of the metaverse and of the new internet. And our newest product, the smart glasses, Ray-Ban Stories, which are offered together with Ray-Ban as a first step in augmented reality glasses or devices. Today is just these glasses can provide taking pictures, taking videos, and connecting with social directly with social platforms, social networks. But this is just the start. And in that regard, just to give you an example, 2 years ago, you needed all of this to use AR/VR, particularly virtual reality. You needed your computer, a couple of cameras, these joysticks or devices to move through, and of course the goggles. Today, sorry. Today, as you know, Quest, it's only, oh, I'm sorry. You only need we can see it now. Yeah, sorry. Today, you only need the goggles without any type of wires wirelessly connected to the internet and offering access to these services. And it's not only, of course, Quest 2, but other devices as well. I mean, the technology is evolving and we're getting there pretty fast. And as you know, and you have been discussing, VR is not only about gaming. There are a lot of applications, utilities. As of today, people are training, people are offering university courses, developing applications for health, business, etc., that would reduce costs, that will permit this avoiding paying high trips, etc., for people to be able to interact in business, education, health, and of course, entertainment. So the metaverse is the next generation internet. It's a place where will enable creators to deliver a full, connected, and immersive experience. We're working to get there, and we think these discussions are important to have, as you have been discussing, the rules, the interactions, and of course the discussions that will help us get there in a way where everybody is included and is part of it. Well, we think it will take. Of course, Meta wants to push through developing the technical and connectivity environment of the metaverse, but as well we want to build together with society, with authorities, with other companies, what would the future would be in the metaverse. We need to develop standards, and here I'm. Well, let me go forward. We need to develop standards, of course. We need industry collaboration. It's not just a work of one single company. We need these conversations to have the issues that we need to include and the concerns, just as we have been discussing. There are a lot of technical, policy, business, social concerns, and of course we need investments. Meta will be investing in the following years $50 million globally just in research to have these discussions and to set this to get to these answers. We'll also be creating or we will be financing creator funds to develop these tools and applications. But more than that, we have a policy focus for the metaverse and policy concerns that need to be discussed and need to be settled. We need to get there through these discussions. And the four pillars of policy focus area for us are economic opportunity and interoperability, of course. We need this to work technically, standards, the appropriate technical structures and decisions, safety and integrity, as it has been mentioned before, equity and inclusion, and of course, privacy, which is very much important for the company. As it is today, this would be certainly something to pay attention to in the metaverse. But before that, and it's something that I just saw, Dr. Bab, in your scale, that is very important. Actually, you put it as first step. If we want to get there, if we want to build a metaverse, especially for our developing countries, we have to think also on the infrastructure part. We need to build networks that will be capable of delivering this amount of information, this amount of data, and in Meta, and in particular here in the region, we have been discussing very much this through the needed coexistence of 5G networks and Wi-Fi 6 in order to transcend to this from this physical world to virtual reality and augmented reality. I'm gonna go forward. So for AR/VR devices to be operational and to be physically appropriate for human beings, we need speeds that will help the brain understand that we are in this that it is in this particular situation and not affect physically with delays and things like that. And these speeds and these technical conditions will only be met through the appropriate technical conditions and the appropriate technical standards. We need low latencies, we need high speeds. In order to get that, the technical conditions, again, the infrastructure and the spectrum conditions are very important for these technologies to develop. So these devices will benefit largely from high bandwidth that will only be available with new technologies. In the case of Wi-Fi 6, the BLP standard, the BLP use case will be necessary for the interaction between this equipment and the current mobile networks, the current mobile services. So even when we are discussing all of these very interesting and important social, political, policy, and business implications of the metaverse, we also need to think in the first steps, which are the technical and connectivity requirements and decisions. In this particular moment, the world is discussing about the 1200 megahertz band, and we have seen a lot of progress on the adoption of 6 gigahertz as a licensed spectrum, particularly in our region, in region 2, all the Americas. this has been a very interesting progress. So I can say the Americas are getting ready for the metaverse, and one very important first step is to having the availability of this spectrum. Here in the CTU have been discussing also about this in the Spectrum Management Task Force. We think it's very relevant to take this into account whenever we are discussing about the metaverse, because in this sense, spectrum would be like the midwife for the metaverse. We need the technical decisions before reaching there, and once we are in the metaverse, we should discuss and we should agree about all other concerns. But for now, we could move to harmonize the 12 megahertz band for unlicensed here in the region, and be able to enter the metaverse efficiently and with the technical conditions we require. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lester. Professor Avinash Prasad, we'll go to you next. Avi, you and I go back quite a ways. So it's lovely to see you virtually, if not in person in recent times. Please take the floor and share with us your perspectives, particularly on some of the economic and political opportunities and risk, etc., and in particular for small island developing states. Thanks, Avi.
Thank you very much, Annalie. It's a great pleasure to be on a platform with you. And also I want to thank CTU for being very far-sighted in trying to set this up and establish a dialogue with our people in the region on these new developments. As you said, I'm going to give a economic policy perspective on the opportunities and the risks, as you say, and how governments are, I think, what I might say, progressive governments are thinking about the metaverse and how we engage with it. Let me begin with some uncomfortable thoughts about technology. Now, technology is very important to economic growth. Since the 1850s, where we have good data, technology and technological change has contributed around 1% to 2% growth per year. The very inconvenient truth is that the internet revolution, the computer revolution, has not changed that at all. We have not grown faster because of the internet. We're still plodding along at 1% to 2% growth per year. The internet, however, and technology and the computer revolution and all technological revolutions have been associated with increasing inequality, with changing levels of wealth from one sector to another, and a concentration of wealth. We've seen the creation of a whole set of internet billionaires, and we've not really seen at the bottom level of the economic structure any lifting out of poverty. There's been intensification of inequality. Technology on its own does not improve the conditions of humanity. It's partly how society responds. And one of the goals of government is that we need to respond in a particular way that makes the technological revolution as progressive, as empowering as possible for everybody. That's our task. I think the other thing to say is that, that's our starting point when we think about technology. It's an important thing. We need to encourage innovation, but just having it doesn't change society for the better. Sir Arthur Lewis, the region's famous economist, the Nobel laureate, was famous for writing a paper on the unlimited supply of labor. And one of the results of the internet revolution is creating unlimited supplies of labor, which reduces the power of labor. Now, if you're a taxi driver, everyone can compete with you with Uber. Now you are a hotel, everyone can compete with you with Airbnb. So these things are good for consumers. They're not necessarily good for producers. So we need to think about, society needs to think a lot about how we organize these things to make sure that we all benefit. And so one of the things we're observing at the moment is that the world is moving to a tremendous amount of trade and activity occurring on a very small number of digital platforms. Meta is one of them, but so is Google, so is Apple, so is Microsoft. They're probably just a handful, 5 or 6 major digital platforms where a tremendous amount of economic activity is occurring, is trading, is being sold, being purchased. And one of the things that we in government, from a government perspective and a public policy perspective, are concerned about is that these are perhaps the new empires. How do we make sure we don't become the new subjects of these new empires? And I think one way would be if we end up just thinking it's about being a consumer. Netflix is fantastic. We all have great access now. But if all we end up doing is being consumers of this new world, we're going to end up being subjects of a new empire. So the question is, how do we also enable small, everybody, any person, any citizen, including those from small islands, to become, have as much access to being producers on these major digital platforms. It's one of the reasons, Annalie, as you know, that in the recently fought general election in Barbados, one of our manifesto commitments is something called myeconomy.com. And I'm very proud to say I was part of developing that idea. And myeconomy.com is to give every citizen in Barbados a digital account where we will give them a curated set of free tools to allow them to be producers of content on these new digital platforms, because we need to improve that access. So we are, I'd say when we think about the metaverse, we think that this is important. This is an innovation we're watching very closely, and we want to be engaged with it. We want to make sure we're engaged with it to make sure that we can find ways in which our people will have great access to it as not just consumers, but as producers. And that's one of the reasons why we established our embassy in the metaverse. We are doing that with our eyes wide open, being engaged, observing. It's our lookout post on this new economy. It's our lookout post to see what's happening and how can we maximize opportunities for our people as producers and not just consumers. The second key perspective for us is that government, of course, has a lot of, you might say, customers, citizens, people we engage with. And we aren't very good at that. The last mile is often a complication in business, and it is a complication in government. We have a range of things and services we offer people, from welfare to support small businesses, to tax and other things that you engage with government on. And we engage very poorly. We are very expensive in our engagement with people. When we engage with people, they're confused, they don't understand, things fall through the cracks. And so we need to have a much more joined up way of engaging with people. And we think the metaverse and alternative realities may be a tool for that. So we can engage with all of our citizens together at one place in a multivariate way and treat them as a whole person and not as little bits of fragmented people on several different online websites. So that's another reason why we wish to engage with the metaverse. We think there's an opportunity there. We don't know for certain, but we think there's an opportunity there that we can take advantage of. And the final thing I think it's important to say, and I think the last session talked a bit about this, the digital world has also changed geography. You know, one of the interesting results in economic growth analysis is that one is impacted significantly by one's neighbors. So if you're growing up as a country in a bad region, a region with lots of problems, with strife and civil war and those issues, it actually impacts you. If you happen to be in a region that is of great prosperity and growth, it impacts you. Digital allows us to change our geography and to choose our geography. That's amazing. We are, working with the Kenyans on establishing a single regulatory space between Barbados and Kenya. We would never have thought about that before. We would have thought maybe we would do that with Trinidad or Guyana, our neighbors, but not with Kenya. And nothing's stopping us establishing single regulatory spaces with a range of countries where our physical geographies are very different. So we can reinvent our geography. We want CARICOM to be a member of the African Free Trade Union. So we think that we can, and those things weren't really possible before without thinking of this digital space. So those are three reasons why we are looking at this space from an economic policy perspective, with our eyes wide open, wanting to engage, being very conscious that there's a lot of technological excitement. Entrepreneurs should be excited. They always are. We need that zeal. That's what makes them entrepreneurs. But that zeal sometimes gives the appearance that technology is democratizing ownership of capital, is creating an equal world. It's not. It's creating a more concentrated world. And we have to find active ways in which we can leverage the new technologies to empower all of our people and to democratize it. We do believe that there are great opportunities for that to happen, but we just have to do so in an active way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Avi. Excellent as always. You raised so many issues that I'm looking forward to having the audience ask some questions to tease out a few more issues in terms of what you have shared with us. I'd like now to introduce Mr. Alan Emtage. I don't think, sir, that we have ever had the pleasure to meet, but I've been a fan of yours for many years. So I'm delighted to have you here with us today, and I give the floor to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be invited to something like this. And I don't have a presentation, but I have several thoughts that I'd like to share with you. The previous presentation, I think, by Mr. Vladimir Radunovich was really an amazing presentation, laying out many of the incredibly complicated issues that will arise in the metaverse. The issues of the living in a virtual reality are far more complicated in some ways than living the real reality, where we have centuries of precedent and infrastructure to build on. This takes us in a whole new direction that we really don't have a good handle on, I think, quite yet. And I will say that one of the things, I came in a little late, so I'm not sure if it was mentioned before, but I would strongly recommend everybody read a novel which is now 20 years old called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. He was the one who actually invented the term metaverse in the first place, and it's a prescient novel. I mean, it may be a little dated right now because he was writing at the beginning of the popularization of the internet in the early 90s, but it really he foresaw a lot of these issues, particularly the issues around inequality and equity, and people's access into the metaverse, their ability to access the metaverse. I mean, many of us who are somewhat global citizens don't really think about what the challenges even now. I mean, just in Barbados during the pandemic, with all the kids, many of the schools online, most of the schools online, that has been a huge challenge just to be able, for many children, just to be able to see their classes, because of economic challenges and connectivity challenges and so on. And Barbados is a fairly small place, so scale that up to somewhere like India, and you start to see the challenges that are really involved here. One of the things that I would say in relation to the Caribbean is how are our primary sources of income and foreign exchange going to be affected by this new reality? What does tourism look like when when the metaverse is involved? For example, tourism is the driver of economic activity in most of the Caribbean, and it's not clear at the moment what effect that is going to have on our economies. I mean, if you're looking at 50, 60, 70% of your foreign exchange coming from a tourism sector, how is that affected by people being able to visit your country in virtual reality? Right now, you may not be able to feel the sand between your toes or the sun on your face, but if your desire, for example, as many of my friends come down here for, they don't go lie on a beach, but what they do really want to explore is the history of Barbados, for example, right? A long, rich history, 400 years of Western occupation, at least, and they could quite easily visit the museum, St. Nicholas Abbey, the old plantations virtually, and never have to step foot on the island. What income would Barbados see from somebody like that? It's not clear that that will translate into an ongoing income stream if, in fact, tourism continues to remain one of the primary sources of income on the island. And another point from my background, looking at search engines and the history of search engines, we now have a situation where we have one very dominant player in the search engine world, right, which is Google. There are others. There's Bing and DuckDuckGo and a few others, but they're a small percentage of the market. We now have a situation in which, for very valid reasons beyond just proprietary information, Google keeps the algorithms that it uses to render search results incredibly private. And one of the primary reasons they do that is because if it became known how the algorithm works, how they do their ranking, people just manipulate it, right? We have an entire multi-billion-dollar industry in search engine optimization, where people are trying to figure out how best to improve their search results on Google. Now, that's a perfectly legitimate thing, and people are more than welcome to do that. The issue for somebody like Google is when that kind of optimization becomes manipulation. And that is what they are trying to guard against. So people trying to manipulate their search results for their own benefit. It gets more tricky if you consider the possibility of a nefarious motive behind search results. And I'm not ascribing any such motives to Google at this point. I'm just saying that, for example, if in a general election campaign, Google decided that they had a preference for a candidate who showed up higher on the search results, they could, and it has been shown in places like India, where that kind of ranking can have a direct impact on election results. Now, think of what happens in a democracy when, though, that kind of, forget just the regular, what has become garden variety misinformation that is spread on social media platforms. What happens when the so far trusted sources of information ranking, if you want to put it that way, are themselves trying to manipulate the public and in ways that we aren't aware of because there is no transparency. Expand that into the idea of the metaverse. Expand that into somewhere like Barbados, with a population of 290,000 people. It's a very small island as are most of the Caribbean islands, that kind of manipulation could have a massive impact on any number of social issues, social policies, on democracy itself. So I think there are opportunities for sure, but we also have to remember that at any point in time, the metaverse is ultimately grounded in real life, right? The people that are creating it are living real lives. They are interacting with one another, hopefully in real life. And so the opportunities for the Caribbean, I think, are a challenge in the same way that technology innovation is a challenge in the Caribbean, because of the kind of halo effect that you get in places like Silicon Valley, Austin, Texas, New York, Boston, where you have communities in real life that interact with one another to create the technologies and systems that we all use. Many places have tried to replicate that, and it's not as easy as just changing tax policy. It's not as easy as having a nice climate. It's not just as easy as immigration policies. There are special sauces that come about. There's a special set of confluences of events that happen to bring all of the ingredients necessary to have in these environments where technology innovation blossoms and flourishes. And even throughout the developed world, there are many cities that have tried to become the next Silicon Valley, become the next Boston for biotechnology, and haven't succeeded because for various complicated reasons of demographics and climate and tax and all of those kinds of things. I mean, tax policies, how does taxation work in the metaverse, and so on. So I think the challenges to the Caribbean should not be understated. I think there are tremendous challenges, as they are already tremendous challenges for them, for the Caribbean in the technology space. I don't think they're insurmountable, but I don't think we should downplay them, because I think we need to face those challenges head on, and the possibility that our economies could be interestingly disrupted over the next several decades as this new reality becomes a reality.
Thank you so much, Alan. This is excellent. Everybody has kept to time, and so we are ahead of the time curve a little bit. So I'd like to ask Michelle if she could prepare some questions from the audience, but I'd like to kick off because, and it's not just from our session, but particularly some things that Vladimir noted, but from the previous session that we had with Gabriel, Sebastian, and Harish, when they spoke about the technological kind of foundation and some of the other issues involved with this idea of the metaverse. And I wrote this question, and I'd like to pose it to kind of leap off into some audience questions and also some engagement between us back and forth. I wrote some of a country's and a government's key national development and national security responsibilities, in my view, and from my experience, will materially be affected by the evolution of the metaverse if it continues on its present trajectory. For example, if your major public services are delivered through the metaverse and access becomes restricted for whatever reason, remember that, as I understand it, the government is not itself going to own this platform. So where does that leave governments and citizens? And so I'd like to perhaps begin with Avinash, thinking about that, and maybe jump to Alan, and then have Lester come in at the end. What needs to happen to ensure that these types of technologies do not actually destabilize national security, national development, Avi, and in particular, national economic development and national sovereignty as well. I think that's important. I'd like to start with you, Avi, and then I'd like to jump to Alan and then Lester to bring up the rear.
It's a really important issue, Annalene. I don't think we have a singular answer. Our approach is, and you've heard us say this before, is ownership also matters. So for a long time, the Caribbean development model has been education, sort of riffing off Sir Arthur Lewis's famous comment that the solution to poverty is not money, it is knowledge. But I think we've learned that knowledge itself isn't enough, that ownership also matters. So we have to think about how we can be owners of this new reality. To some of Alan's points, I'm less concerned about tourism, because I believe that this actually will create new additional revenue streams, so people who cannot visit here who will pay for another experience. But we're going to have to actively make sure that we are owners of some of the augmented realities of Barbados, that we participate in that. So I think it's going to be perhaps more diverse income streams than we had before. And in the same way, to your earlier question, I think we have to make sure that we're not dependent on a singular platforms as much as we can. If we can't be ownership, we can't participate as owners. And so that this is additional rather than subtractive, that we have multiple ways of accessing our citizens, of which these platforms are important ways, but not the only ways. And so we have, if you like, built-in redundancy on that. But I think we have to think about how we as small states or developing countries, the global south, can play a greater ownership role. Because otherwise we're just creating 5 new empires like the European empires of the past. And we need to find ways in which we have a different relationship with these new economic empires.
Thank you, Avinash. If I could just ask for Vladimir to also be included in this conversation, if he's still with us, that would be great, because I think he probably also has some good insights to give. So I'll go next to Alan, same question, Lester, and then Vladimir, please.
Yeah, I think one of the key, following on from what Avinash just said, I want to think one of the key issues here is going to be interoperability of the various platforms. Now, I think that's going to probably have to happen as a matter of course, although I say that looking at the Android Apple fight that has been going on for a decade now, more than that, 15 years probably, where they actively try not to interoperate. And that doesn't necessarily bode well for universal interoperability of these platforms going forward. Everybody seems to want to own their own patch and not give it up to anybody else. And as we learned in the old, I'm going to date myself here, but the old VHS Betamax war, only one may live, at the end of the day. So I don't know if that's what we're heading for, or if we're heading for a more cooperative environment. It's hard to say at this point. It's such a new thing. We have institutions that do this, right? I worked in the IATF for many years, and this is what the IATF does. It fosters interoperability. So we will see where that goes, but that is a key issue, because if you cannot afford to be held hostage by one platform. You must be able to move between platforms easily if you are going to depend on this, any more so than you can depend on having the monopolies of old. If your internet service provider decides to cut you off and they're the only game in town, you're up that proverbial creek, right? So
Annalise, do
Excellent.
you mind if I interrupt and give a little interesting, Alan triggered a thought in my mind, which is that the interoperability can be considered a little bit like the 18th century navigation acts during the European empires. So in the navigation acts, if you were a Spanish island next door to a British island, you couldn't trade with each other. You weren't allowed to navigate their waters. So you had Spanish ports who only traded, the Spanish islands only traded with Spain. They couldn't trade with each other. They couldn't trade the islands next door. And we're in danger of recreating the 21st century version of this unless we can crack some of the interoperability issues.
Thank you both. Lester and then Vladimir. We're talking about governments, national development, national security, national sovereignty, and the impacts, and particularly from where you sit, Lester. This is an important, so we're putting you on the hot seat to have some perspective on how do you manage these mega corporations. I mean, Avi would say, because he's a numbers man, that they're worth more than the GDP of a tiny little island like Barbados. So how do these small island states really play with these massive global companies and the kind of market capitalization that they're also accruing? Please, Lester, and then we'll go to Vladimir.
Sure. So again, I think the metaverse per se is the next generation of the internet, or an upgraded internet, which we have been building together for 25 years, at least in this new stage. In that regard, certainly, I agree. We will be facing the same issues and same concerns as of today. Technically speaking, or market-wise, interoperability, of course, is very important. And I understand the issue between Android, iOS. We can move to computers, devices, etc. And certainly you will have different competitive conditions. However, the internet per se is open, and people can develop their strategies and business cases, etc. That's what we want to build in the metaverse. I mean, it should not be the reign or the property of one and only, or a group of companies. I think everyone should have the opportunity to be there. And in that regard, authorities, government regulators, they have, as we all know, they have been, if I can use the term, learning and practicing for the last 8 years on how to regulate the internet. I'm certain if there, and this is my, as a former regulator, my view is that you need to regulate when there is something to correct in the market, not just regulate for regulating. So if things are not working correctly in the market, certainly regulators are finding the way to cope with that and to make decisions, make regulations that will turn the market in the direction of more efficiency and more fairness, if I may. So I don't. I mean, certainly the challenges are going to be bigger because we are talking about something more massive, much more immersive. Our concerns of today of the internet would certainly potentiate in that sense because of the number of people connected, because of the interactions, because of the amount of data. But I think it's the same issues that we will be facing. It's the scale perhaps that would change, and in that regard, the challenge is there for regulators. But again, regulating a market, being it a digital market or any other market, depends on the effects this market, this economic entities create in the market, not in the desire of the authorities or the government to control a market.
Thank you so much, Vladimir.
Yeah, I guess we need a full 3 days more to discuss these challenges. But building on previous one, I think it is a scale that is a challenge, but it's also pace. And I think that's even bigger challenge. If you look at new generations that are jumping into NFTs and crypto world and decentralized, things are moving so fast that maybe also because it's decentralized, that we are not, even people that are in the field are not managing to get it, let alone people that should be steering it somehow towards economy with all the disruptions you can have in mind. But you have to understand how that works, and let alone the regulators or diplomats and so on, which are generally very slow in this. So I think one thing that we all, particularly us from developing countries, but the whole world, should learn more is what is the exponential function. I think we don't understand it well. But going into details of the, let's say, the Caribbean perspective, maybe developing countries perspective. On one hand, there is the infrastructure that is needed, and I know that is anyhow in the focus of the Caribbean is the infrastructure, the access to the internet. But this goes steps beyond, because you need much better infrastructure, as we discussed, including the servers and the gadgets and all of that. The second one is standards, and a quick reflection on that. There is one of the trends which is showing on a global level is the going towards the open standards, open generally, not just open source, but open standards, open concepts. And I guess the developing countries can actually onboard that and help maybe within different standardization bodies and fora to push for more open standards, because that is what unbundles this dependence and these opportunities for only the big guys. That's which allows you to maybe play with the Lego-like components and create something on your own. And the good thing when it comes to decentralization is that probably the small countries cannot do much, but this is a general global trend and fight between the current big tech giants and the emerging ones, and then the regulatory frameworks in the EU and US and China. So I think in a way it helps, this battle helps developing countries as well, but we have to follow it closely. I'm not going to open the issue of security. I think it's a specific thing that we still can't see, but the only thing we see that as soon as the technology becomes critical for some sort of national security, there is a whole game changer, and you have politicization, you have states jumping into that. You can see that with the IoT, with the AI, and so on. And maybe lastly, and I'm back to something I said at the beginning, was the capacities and skills to understand and use smartly these technologies rather than running into that. If you take a look at which countries have the first embraced the national cryptocurrencies, it was the Caribbean. Not because it's Caribbean, but it's small countries, right? US, China, EU haven't rushed into that. They spend a lot of time in analyzing what it brings, because they have capacities. They have people that can basically deal with that. So I think one bit that we in developing countries should think about, and that's maybe an input to the next discussion on skills, is that when we train kids and young generations into dealing with new technologies, that we have to help them also understand the society and the impacts of the society. So that means not just the skills, but making them responsible citizens in this new, whatever, Web 3.0 world, where they would understand also the privacy, security, economic aspects, and all that while developing that world.
Thank you. That's a fantastic response. I'd like not to overstep into the next session, but that skills issue is a very important one, and I look forward to hearing what they have to say on that issue. If I could ask the CTU and Michelle, are there any questions from the audience that you might help us to field now?
Yes, Dr. Bob, we have many questions lined up for our panelists. And this one is from our Facebook live streaming platform from Sergio Mark. He's asking, seeing that the metaverse seems to have some ties with cryptocurrency, would there be some formal adoption? Would there be some formal adoption of cryptocurrency within formal financial sectors? And that question to...
That sounds like a question for Professor Avinash Prasad.
Yes, definitely.
The cryptocurrency investors come to us a lot. I mean, one of the challenges of being a small state is we attract a lot of entrepreneurs of things that are both good and perhaps on the edge, between the cover, between the cracks, and some of these crypto investors are being pushed away from other places. And so we have to be very careful to make sure we do the right thing. And our philosophy so far, I think, across the region has been, it's not clear to us why cryptocurrencies need separate regulation. The essence of regulation is protecting consumers and protecting the financial system. So the way we regulate a volatile security is by making sure that we don't expose the vulnerable consumers too much to it until it becomes more stable, perhaps. Most of the crypto investors really want regulation which allows them to be exempt from all regulation. And so far we've been resisting that. And I think with good reason. I think I would say one broader picture though, which is that there needs to be there are a lot of important powers in the digital world. They are, because of the power of because network economics encourages bigness. One of the things that Meta wants to do legitimately, and Google wants to do, and keeping its algorithms secret and all, is kind of create big networks, and that gives them tremendous economic power. And we've been there before. This is monopoly power or oligopoly power, and we do need to think, who is the countervailing force? Is it going to be people? Is it going to be producers? I don't think they can be the countervailing force. So governments do need to play an important role, not to discourage the innovation. We need to somehow get that balance right between innovation, but also making sure that power is not abused and people have access. From a small state point of view, we can do two things. We can agitate for global policy response, and at the local level, we can do a lot to make sure that our people can be producers and not just consumers on these platforms.
Thanks, Avi. Alan, Vladimir, Lester, any responses to that question from the audience?
This is not my bailiwick, so I'll stay out of that one.
Vladimir, any perspectives?
Just maybe a quick one that what Avinash mentioned is that there will be global fora that will be discussing these things in one way or another. And unfortunately, again, because of the lack of capacities that small states have, including in diplomatic circles. If you look at the missions that small countries have in Geneva or New York or somewhere else, it's really a couple of people, and very few of them can actually understand this. We need to make sure that we are able to follow, and that's my dog barking, that we are able to follow the discussions in WTO or ITO, wherever things happen. And I think it has to be top on the agenda.
See, but this becomes, I think, a very, very important issue. And Avinash, because of your position within CARICOM, but also in government, if you go back to the model that I shared, that's almost 18 years or more ago that I developed that. And I think our small island states have gotten worse, Vladimir, at covering these issues because they require resources, money, people, to cover and to report back, and systems and structures and so on. So again, I come back to the point that Avi began with. He said, we think that technology is this wonderful equalizer. It's not. And as it continues to evolve, it's getting more and more challenging for small island states in particular to manage. So I put it out to us as a group. Do we have solutions with respect to how the Caribbean, and maybe I should put, although he's not a part of this panel, maybe I should put the Secretary General of the CTU on the hot seat and ask him, in this context, what are the CTU's plans for helping the Caribbean as a region? And I assume you would work very closely with Professor Pufsad in his regional position within CARICOM on that economic council. But what's the plan? Do we have one, or are these conversations supposed to help us begin to map out that plan or strategy?
Thanks for putting me on the spot. Of course, we do work closely with the CARICOM Commission on the Economy, of which Professor Prasad is chair. And in fact, there are a number of recommendations along developing the digital economy that have come out of that commission, including the promotion of the single ICT space, and in particular the elimination of roaming to help drive the uptake of data services and so on. So we definitely work closely in that respect. And certainly we called on him for this reason to be a part of this panel, because we certainly believe that even this, in terms of building awareness, is part of is a piece of the puzzle. So how do we get entrepreneurs and innovators excited about the new possibilities? And I spoke about government interventions. Yes, that is one thing, but you also need the uptake of citizens, and you also need the capacity of the private sector to be able to provide some solutions. And one of the things actually that Professor Prasad said about growing inequalities, in particular tourism, he mentioned I think it was Uber, or someone mentioned Uber, but what I wanted to challenge him on is, in particular, for these platforms that are providing platforms for the sharing economy. Certainly, an old lady in St. Lucie with her 2-bedroom house can participate within this, digital economy by, accessing Airbnb, Flipkey, and all these other platforms that she did not have access to before. So certainly it provides an avenue for leveling the playing field with the big hotel sectors and so on. In fact, there was some degree of pushback for these services by the hotel sector at some point. And same for the Airbnb, the ride-sharing platform, because I could after hours take my vehicle and make a few extra bucks. So in a sense, is that not also part of the leveling of the playing field and providing opportunities for the disenfranchised, those who are not connected necessarily, or through, can't afford a permit, high cost and so on, to participate within this growing digital economy?
Yeah, well, I just want to make a comment before I ask Vladimir. He has his hand up, so he wants to make a comment on this. But you remember the whole notion of creative destruction, Rodney, because the entities that will be affected by ride sharing and those things and are small taximen and others who make their living. So how do we manage, and this is probably Avinash's bailiwick as well, but the creative destruction that technology introduces into economies as we grow in cycles. Vladimir, please.
Yeah, a quick comment, not that much on creative disruption, but rather on this participation of the small countries. You mentioned that it's also the matter of money and people and resources, but there are ways around that. First of all, it has to become a strategic political priority. And you can see that in digital policies as well. As long as digital policies are not, but just digitalization without the policy is not a priority of the higher level of governments, it's not there. It's not on the agenda. So it has to become a clear understanding of the high level people in the governments that this is the next step. You need to think about digital. Everything is digital. It's, there is no more cyberspace. This is the real world. It will become the same with the metaverse at some point. So it's strategic priority. And the second one is working together to let's say, optimize the resources. On one hand, certainly, I'm sure the Caribbean states, not least to the CTU, work together also in the New York, in Geneva, wherever things happen, and that has to be reinforced. But there is another bit, which is that representation today is not just for the governments. Well, obviously, when decisions are being brought, yes. But in many, many cases, it's actually about being in the dialogue, contributing to the dialogue. And guess what? You have an amazing number of people, and I'm sure you all know them, which are not part of the government, but they are somewhere in ICANN, and even in ITU, in various business communities. You have your representatives everywhere around. Start with mapping them, whom you have, where they are, what they can do. They're all, I'm sure, very big patriots. They will help. So try to get all the resources you have, all hands on deck, if you wish, of the Caribbean people in different institutions and for around the world. The IGF, the IEEE, and so on. And that's my advice always when doing the trainings for small countries, for diplomats. Start working with other NGOs, with the NGOs, with businesses. You have to work on this together.
Thank you so much. Michelle, other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Bob. You know, Professor Nash mentioned that we need to make the tech revolution as progressive and powerful for all. I would like to add, inclusive for all. So this next question comes from Mrs. Taylor, who asks, how do we get the older generation involved in the new reality of the metaverse and all that it offers? Is there a concern of leaving them behind and widening the gap already created by the online boom, accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you. I will begin with perhaps the youngest among us. Alan, can you give us a perspective, because you were there at the beginning of this whole search engine idea, and so on. You've seen the progressions of things and so on. So not that I'm putting you on the spot, but how do you get older people? I'm assuming you're speaking perhaps about people who are older than any of us in this discussion right now. But how do you get them involved and ensure inclusion across the board? Alan, would you begin? And then I'd love to hear from Lester as well, and then from Vladimir.
You too.
You're on
There we
mute.
go. Well, I'm flattered that you might think I'm the youngest person here. I'm not sure that's true actually, but we'll move on from there. That's a real challenge. I mean, that's not to make a joke about it, but it's a real challenge. I have several elderly relatives that I keep an eye on in various ways, and I will tell you that it's a conversation that I have amongst my friends quite often, and have been having quite even more so recently with exactly this topic, NFTs and the metaverse and all of these new technologies, and saying to them, are we going to be what our parents are to the existing technology for the new technology? Is it going to be as challenging and as confusing to us as the existing technology is to the generation above me? And I think that's, that also depends on user interfaces, right? I mean, a lot of these issues go away if you have good intuitive user interfaces. That also requires money. That also often requires expensive equipment or hardware or something to the virtual reality world is not going to work if you get something that works at 3 frames a second, right? It doesn't work unless you have the capacity to truly interact with it, and at the best level. And so I think this is really a challenge of design and access, but creating interfaces into this new world that allow people to do so in ways that are familiar to their existing life. If you step into virtual reality and you can have a conversation with somebody and you can interact with the technology, be it AI or a real person, in a way that's familiar to you, that will go a long way. The difficulty with the older generation is largely about complicated, often unnecessarily complicated interactions with the technology, because they are being built by young people who understand them. And I mean, even myself, I'm a technologist. I've been working on the internet for 40 years, and I marvel at some of the true dumpster fire user interfaces that I see coming out of even major corporations. And I think, you guys, how are you doing this? How did this ever get out? because it becomes insular, right? Because it becomes a small group of developers and a small group of designers, and it becomes somewhat incestuous, and they think that what they're designing is understandable to the rest of the world, and it's not. And so that's my only solution to it, really, is to
and Alan, that is an excellent response. I think that we have run out of time. I think that we only have about 1 more minute. So I unfortunately, Rodney, you need to do this again and let us focus on some of these key areas to just have a whole session on. But I think that's a wonderful point to end on from Mr. Alan Emptage. That interfaces, user interfaces design. I will never forget, my mother is elderly, and she had a real challenge, and still does, working on a computer keyboard, typing and so on, because it happened. So I remember when they first came out, I got her a gift of an iPad. And when I showed her, you can just point, and she says, "Oh, I want one of those." And I actually had to ban her from the Apple bookstore, because she just went on and she was able to buy her books and do things. So this notion is about inclusion, Alan, and everyone else. And if the people who are designing these technologies do not reflect the world, then you're going to have a lack of access. I think that's a wonderful note on which to end. I would like to thank all of you for an excellent discussion. Rodney and Michelle, we look forward to the CTU inviting us back to perhaps choose 1 or 2 of these topics and drill down a little deeper. Thank you all so much for most engaging conversation. Back to you at the CTU. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. I've said we're really doing 3 webinars in one, but because we wanted to touch on all of the issues, the metaverse itself and what it meant as a technology, and the opportunities and risk challenges and so on, which we've adequately dealt with. And lastly, the skills. And this is, we're coming on now to the 3rd leg, the last segment, digital skills to support the metaverse. And we'd like to introduce the moderator for us, Michelle, the panelists.
Thank you, Ashwin. Now, this panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Java Seeley, who is Barbados's CARICOM Youth Ambassador and entrepreneur. And the speakers for this panel session include Dr. Kim Malaleo, Senior Lecturer of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine Campus, Mr. Stuart Butler, who is the Course Director, School of Digital Technologies and Arts, Staffordshire University in the United Kingdom, and Christy Power, Technologist of the Bahamas. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General. A blessed good afternoon to everyone. I think that the last conversation was a beautiful place with which to start, because we're speaking about digital skills, and one of the principal skills is design. But let me not get too far ahead of myself. Like Michelle introduced me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mr. Java Seeley. I am Barbados CARICOM Youth Ambassador, but what that doesn't say is how passionate I am about technology and how it is used for regional development. So, ladies and gentlemen from across the world, I want to wish you a special hello, and I wish to welcome you to the 3rd conversation of the Knowledge Cafe. I also want to say good evening to those in the further physical regions like the United Arab Emirates, like His Excellency Ambassador Abed, who led a brilliant first conversation, to those also on the African continent, and just a special good afternoon or good morning now. I would argue that just by assembling in this virtual space on such a special occasion, we are one big step closer to experiencing the metaverse, and I think we largely realize. I want to equally congratulate the Caribbean Telecommunications Union and the Government of Barbados for hosting such an event, because I believe it was Professor Prasad who would have mentioned just how far-sighted it is. And that's largely because, as with all things technology, the change will happen with or without our attention. But we're bringing our attention to a very rich opportunity, not only for survival, but for more economic and cultural repositioning, if the last conversation was any indicator. So far we've spoken to the very technical terms, like crypto, like the blockchain, like NFTs, like the different technologies that are used, and to the economic opportunities. And we've outlined just what constitutes the world that is literally being built out by combining these skills, of traditional skills like architecture, and combining it in collaboration with game developers to manifest, human imagination and even defy the physics of our physical world. And that's just one part of Web 3.0. So Mr. SG, Mr. Rodney Taylor, I want to thank you for the vote of confidence that you gave in me in your opening remarks, because like you said, I was born for this. Me and millions of others who are defined by, the generation bracket Gen Z, though, it is largely understood that, this is what we were born for. Contrary to what we believe, the metaverse is really for all of us, just as is the internet. From the look of things now, with large tech companies leading the way on inclusion and diversity for persons of all capabilities, the premise and promise of the metaverse is to be shared by all humanity so that we can enjoy the potential for enriched economic earning and human benefit. And I'm glad that each conversation led up to where we are now. And just to give you a brief anecdote before I introduce to you this amazing panel that we have today, I want to tell you a story. So I have a younger cousin born in 2006, and he is absolutely bent on gaming every free second he can get. After he's finished with online school, he will search relentlessly to load Steam or NVIDIA Game Shield, find his way onto Fortnite, find a lobby, and immerse himself in a community with a passion for sharing their gaming experience. And I learned by watching him that it wasn't about the addiction to the game, but it was about practicing a skill, because he envisions an entire career out of this. And whereas our family would want him to be serious and envision, getting a real job, he seemed to understand from early many of the things that we didn't. I'm sure that this is how most of the creators in the Caribbean feel, because we agree largely that our people, our creative and cultural capacity is one of our greatest resources and assets. But these skills are some of the ones that are imposed on the promise of the metaverse already, with the creation of music and art, NFTs, and just selling unique assets while they are in their youth. So while we may have wanted him to sharpen his skills in accounting, poetry, business, whatever, he sees them as irrelevant and is much more interested in computer science, in coding, in game and app development, and specifically game architecture. And he's 15, and his point of view gives us all a glimpse into what the metaverse will be as our hardware and bandwidth catch up to what is, to our software ambitions, but largely the skills that are involved in not only being passionate consumers, as was mentioned before, but equal partners in the creation of a world that the online world can benefit from. So today, under our special theme, we're here to explore those same skills, given that context, that are needed for the Caribbean to position itself to take advantage of the same opportunities, identified in the conversation before, moderated by a lady to whom I am referred as her number one, none other than Dr. Annalie Babb, and how this might impact regional academic institutions in the short to long term. So we have with us the perfect panel for such discussion. And joining us this afternoon is none other than Dr. Kim Aliolu, a senior lecturer at the University of the West Indies, who will present to us on Meeting the Metaverse, Rethinking the Caribbean Academic Institution. We'll also be joined by Mr. Stuart Butler, the course director from the School of Digital Technologies and Arts at Staffordshire University over in the UK, who will present to us on the transferability of games development skill sets for the growing opportunities building the metaverse. And finally, by a young technologist, Ms. Christy Powell, who will be giving us a presentation. So each presenter will speak on the broad theme of digital skills to support the metaverse with their own presentation. We only have an hour here today, Mr. SG. You heard the repeated calls for us to have more spaces. So today I would ask that each presenter, use 15 minutes only, so that we can have an extra 15 minutes to really discuss this in greater detail. Thank you so much, Dr. Malilu. The floor is now all to you.
Thank you, Java. You can see my screen and you can hear me fine. Yes?
We can, yeah.
Excellent. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share some excuse me, some preliminary thoughts. Meeting the Metaverse, Rethinking the Caribbean Academic Institution. So I want to use the very few minutes that I do have to chat a little bit about the flows from the Metaverse into Caribbean academic institutions, but also the flows out of Caribbean academic institutions to the Metaverse. I sense from the conversation today that there's a great deal more interest in the flows from the academic institution to the Metaverse. So let's start there, and you can stop me at any point. So, of course, what we will deliver to the Metaverse as Caribbean academic institutions is a bundle of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and also products. And I dare say that these are pretty much an extension of existing programs. Though they may look different, though they may sound different, much of the foundations for the Metaverse, the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and products for the Metaverse are grounded in existing programs that are at our academic institutions. You've heard a lot about the Metaverse, and you'll understand from all that you've heard today that the worlds and experiences that comprise the Metaverse require the making of assets by creators, a whole range of creators, the attracting, engaging, and helping within this Metaverse, and that is all to do with community building. Of course, the designing, as Java has mentioned, the organizing of experiences, which require a whole range of builders. Game designers, yes, but much more than game designers, much more than game designers, I would say, Java. The opportunities to explore, learn, and enhance. And this requires a whole host of participants to play and earn, to customize, and much more. To connect the physical and the virtual world, this will require bridgers of all types, cartographers, historians, digital twin implementers, naturalists, data providers, analysts, public health and safety experts, spatial mappers, and more and more. Not only that, but the development of real-time content by whom? By a set of performers, a whole plethora of performers, actors, musicians, guides, streamers, etc., etc. So when we think of the skills, the knowledge and attitudes, not just skills, but knowledge and attitudes that accompany the skills for the Metaverse, we must think of this in terms of a number of existing and expanded buckets that cross these areas. Annalie mentioned today her 6 layers, I believe, of access. And I put to you that we can use John Radoff's formulation of the 7 layers of the Metaverse to understand the different parts of this universe that go into building the whole thing. So several times today has been made of infrastructure that enables the Metaverse. For example, 5G, Wi-Fi, 6G, cloud, etc., etc. Infrastructure. A lot of the work that I do is at this layer, this base layer, infrastructure. On top of that, of course, there's a human interface in mobile, smart glasses, wearables, haptics, gestures, voice, neural networks, all of this, neural systems, all of this in turn spawning a whole set of skills required. Much of these skills, knowledge, products are actively being developed not only around the world, but there's quite a bit of activity in the Caribbean. Decentralization, of course, as you know, is central to the Metaverse, and this calls for edge computing, AI agents, microservices, blockchain. But I don't want you to think of the Metaverse as comprising only this layer of edge computing, blockchain, etc. There are 7 layers, and each of them is, in a sense, a universe on its own. Spatial computing, 3D engines, virtual reality, augmented reality, you've heard about this. The creator economy, huge, up and down, huge. Vertical and horizontal value chains within the creator economy. Design tools of all sorts, design methodologies, designers, asset markets, workflows, commerce. Discovery is a whole universe of its own. And this is enabled by a network of persons, of humans, who create ads, encourage social enterprises and activity, curate content, rate, build stores, agents, etc. And then the experience. This experience that is brought to you through a number of channels, games, esports, shopping, etc. So when we think of the skills that are required, I want you very much to understand that these skills are not located only in the tech enterprise, but they span the whole range of infrastructure, human interface, decentralization, spatial computing, creator economy, discovery, and experience that in turn require a broad range of skills and disciplines. I also want to give you a sense of what academic institutions get from the metaverse. Here, for example, I teach communications at the university, and I would love to bring my students into remote areas where they can understand the nuances of the topography, the morphology of hard to reach areas, so that they can come up with innovative and effective solutions to serve the underserved with context-appropriate telecommunications. It's not always that I can grab my whole cohort and take them up the mountains, for example, to Rincon. I would like them, though, to experience what we do experience when we go up the road to Rincon. So from the metaverse, I would like to draw on the skills and the facilities of augmented and virtual reality, drones. So if you can.
So today I'm going to scan this room. So you can see I'll start to scan up here. Typically I'll take a good minute. So I think we are ready to use this. So now what I'm doing, I have my scan and I start to add my information for artificial intelligence. I hold it around this environment, and then using integration with Google Lens, I can get the names. Annotation, you just put label, you put the name, so let's say cable, and then video, audio, locate, etc. Observation, I can add it very simply. That's it. HDMI extender. That's the HTC receiver. Now I have the Netgear fiber channel.
Voice, data, and video information.
Will guide you through the step-by-step process that you need to do during the session.
It is comprised of 2 basic elements made of glass.
I'll help you to install extender. As you can see here, the cable connections that you have to have in mind. One here, you have the blue one that goes in the second outlet and the black. So today.
So you see that I would like to use these tools also, the tools of the metaverse in my teaching. And this will enable me to provide experiences that are too expensive in time and resources to implement in traditional methods. So what we see is a sense of the capabilities in the classroom for virtual reality, augmented reality. There are many tools that are high-level tools that we could use at the university to build these realities, extended realities. Eon XR is one such. And this, though, requires a number of skills and content development of its own to bring into the classroom. For example, we are required to scan the environment with, for example, the smartphone to create a 360-degree environment that I wish to bring into the classroom. We need to photograph highlights of key artifacts. We need to add content, as you saw in the video, adding annotations and content. This is facilitated through Google Lens. We can add PDFs. You saw the introduction of assessments and quizzes. There can be location and identity-based challenges, etc. And then you can demonstrate by walking through, pointing out artifacts, etc. At this time, UE has trained 300 educators on the EON XR platform. More than 30 persons will be trained per month in 2022, and a number of courses are planned to be developed using XR. But it's important that we understand that, that high impact educational practices are key to the development of academic programs and the delivery of academic programs. So we must always look at the entire picture, not simply because the conversation and the hype is around metaverse, that we can step away from the key strategic objectives of an academic institution. The high impact educational practices, there are several of them that are well established. The first year experiences of students, common intellectual experiences, learning communities, diversity and global learning, writing intensive courses, e-portfolios, service learning, community-based learning, internships, undergraduate research, collaborative assignments and projects, capstone courses and projects. So we must ask ourselves, to what extent can the metaverse assist in these activities to enable higher learning outcomes? Also, how can these activities be put to use to deliver to the metaverse and the rest of reality those skills that are most potent? It is also important that we understand that there are standard criteria that can change over time for assessing the universities, and the World University Rankings is one such. And the rankings are spread at this time over a number of channels: teaching, research, citations, international outlook, and industry income. So all of these are part of the academic enterprise. The higher education reality check, I know that my time is running short, so I'll speed up. I want you to think, when you think of the academics, the skills developed through an academic institution, that the academic institution comprises many different enterprises of itself. The academic enterprise is one, but there are a number of enablers, and of course there is business. At the same time, we recognize the need for equal access for all to affordable quality tertiary education. There is a demand for lifelong and online blended learning, credentials unbundling, career orientation, specialization and consolidation. And at the same time, our resources have declined globally, and of course also in the Caribbean. The opportunity, though, is that global higher education enrollment is set to increase hundreds of fold between now and 2030. So this all calls for a 360 rethink of universities in the Caribbean, regional universities. At the within the academic enterprise, we ask, how can we differentiate ourselves? And we ask fundamental questions like, what are contemporary fundamentals that must be taught at the university? Practical matters such as plagiarism, assessment, and very importantly, who will be left behind? Enablers, digital transformation, which we are going through right now, but other practical matters like enterprise architecture, platforms and applications, open education resources, digital and IP rights, electronic transfer of records, the whole student experience, identity management, and differentiation, again, at the business level, differentiation, revenue generation, and fresh models. Models, fresh models for processes, procurement, HR, market, and most importantly, formal and informal partnerships, which really form the center of the way forward for the Caribbean academic institutions, both formal and informal partnerships. So I will close by saying that the future of the Caribbean academic institutions rests very, very centrally on the establishment of differentiating factors that come from the Caribbean itself, that emanate horizontally and vertically through a variety of value chains, that draw on what it is that we bring to the metaverse: our voice, our analysis, our poetry, our dance, our art, our sport, our technology, the platforms we have developed, but very much so at the heart of this is the community of development-focused individuals in the Caribbean that span all of the sectors, including technology. And I know that my time has expired, so I will leave it there and happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you very, very, very kindly, Dr. Malilu. I think that was really in essence a representation of, I believe, the Caribbean academic history. It was very dense in its, composition. It was very skillfully delivered. And I think that means that it gives me a lot of hope as a proud graduate of the UW-IKFIL campus. And therefore, I want to now use this time to transition to hear from Mr. Stuart Butler. And Stuart, I want to give the floor to you to present now on the transferability of games development skill sets for the growing opportunities building out the metaverse. The floor is all yours, Stuart.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Java. Thank you very much. And yeah, I must say it was fascinating to hear. As always, being the second person to speak is always risky when you've got graphics in slides. So one or two might look a bit familiar. So I'll just share my screen now. So just bear with me. It should be that one. Hopefully that's visible for everybody. Awesome. Yeah. So I was asked to kind of give a perspective on skills development and the sort of skills that would be beneficial for university students and young people generally to work in towards building the metaverse, and what skills in, say, 5 years' time might look like. And my current kind of feeling about this is very much focused on what we currently do here and how the skills that we are currently teaching in our games development courses are setting our students into a good place potentially to feed into the growing opportunities that the metaverse offers. And from there, so I wanted to start by just outlining what job roles are already predefined as games industry. And I decided to hunt initially on what the internet believes that to be. And Indeed.com, which ran a fairly interesting article on the 7 key roles of the games industry, listed those on the left there. So design, art, sound engineering, programming, level designers, testers, and games producers. And one thing that I thought was oddly missed was the other side of that, which is the interaction with users. And so I also added a few key ones there, which are things like animators, broadcasters, creators, event managers, promoters, and researchers. Now, I think it's the next slide that will look familiar. No, it's not the next slide, it's the one after. Before I go on to linking back to what has already been mentioned, actually, I wanted to bring up a study that was conducted in 2020. It's actually from research from 2017 to 18 by Burning Glass and Epic Games, which was looking globally at the demand for real-time 3D skills and how technology and the technological requirement for interactive media has grown exponentially over time. And some of the headline points here are made on the right-hand side is the increase of open job roles that are looking for 3D graphics skills. Now, this is just looking purely at real-time 3D skills. No consideration for the metaverse or gaming specifically, but just real-time 3D skills, because that's ultimately what we're working towards. this graphic should look familiar from the previous speaker. What I wanted to do with this, and the reason why I've included this, and actually it's very helpful, Kim, that you brought this up. This is John Radoff's idea of all of the jobs that the metaverse is going to create, which I think actually he's a very good commentator on the metaverse, and his blogs and articles are fascinating to read. What I wanted to do from this is actually to highlight which of these jobs are already very active in the kind of 3D interactive media kind of world that the metaverse is growing out of. And so I put a little green tick, which some of them are hidden behind my face, so apologies if my face is in the way. These are the job roles that are actively employed within the games industry as currently sits. So probably a few more of these at a stretch you could branch out to. But some of these key roles like artists, modelers, writers, designers, character artists, videographers, these are already key skills that are being taught across the world at academic institutions for students wanting to become games developers or even just interactive 3D media developers. So that could be looking at film, it could be looking at VR and AR applications, it could be architectural visualization, any of those kind of real-time 3D applications, these skills are already there. So this isn't a case of the new magical metaverse comes along and we need a whole new set of jobs. We've got the skills already, we just need to re-angle them slightly. I also included on the left-hand side a small asterisk against performers. Performers currently feed into games development in a much smaller context than they will do, or the prediction is for the metaverse. So performers at the moment feed into part of the creation process, but not the real-time delivery. The benefit with the metaverse, or the addition of the metaverse, is that those performers are able to provide that performance in real time. So slight difference for them on that. I think I'm going to fly through this a little bit because I was going to explain this slide a little bit more, but that's already been kind of covered for me. But one thing that I think is really important to understand is that whilst the metaverse is new and very interesting, and Java, you said yourself about, was it your brother or your cousin? Sorry, I was in and out, so I had somebody pop into my office. But there is already a very passionate interest from young people in these digital skills and these developments, and in absorbing the content that is already out there. You mentioned about Fortnite and jumping in there. And Fortnite in itself has become a platform for something other than just games. In its nature, with concerts and all sorts of things delivered in a digital world during the pandemic. So there's already this keen interest. We already have the skills there. We just need to, as I said before, just redirect them slightly towards what we're working towards. A few things I would point out about this: I find digital twin implementers to be a slightly ambitious statement, because that could be digital twin as in scanning of spaces like we've seen already. It could also be digital twin as in a character model. So there's a few things around some of these claims I think fit into multiple areas, but like I say, the skills are kind of already there. So the question that I was asked when I kind of spoke to the CTU a couple of days ago was, how can we prepare young people for building the metaverse? And I believe at this point that's a really difficult question to answer. And the only reason I say it's very difficult is I can't honestly say, and I'm not sure anybody can, what the metaverse is going to be in 5 years. If someone was to start a university degree course this September in the metaverse, I don't feel we could be 100% sure what in 3 years' time the metaverse is going to look like, because it is moving so incredibly quickly. But what I am, I'd say I'm very confident about, is that we are going to be providing real-time interactive 3D experiences. So if we focus on those skills and have those skills in place, add that awareness of the metaverse and an adapting awareness of the metaverse, and that's the important thing, is that we don't state what it is now and assume that's what it's always going to be. We make sure that we are dynamic and we understand that skills are going to change. As technology moves on, we need new differences. Virtual reality, augmented reality has already made us change how we look at interactability within 3D applications. Where we used to have a keyboard and a mouse, or a normal joystick controller, we're now looking at having our hands. We can interact with things via a touchscreen, etc. So that flexibility and that dynamism within the way that we look at learning and the opportunities that we can have is key. The other thing is the risks. I think it's important to know that if we build specifically for one platform, there is always going to be a risk that it may not be the platform that grows. So an awareness of what the metaverse brings, both positive and negative, is key. But if we provide graduates with the skills to contribute to any interactive 3D media, my belief is they'll have the skills to be able to build the metaverse, or help to build the metaverse, and expand it, progress it, and provide the experiences that your family are already so excited about, and the children everywhere. You know, my kids are a little bit younger, and they're already, I can't keep them away from sort of creator-based content on YouTube where they're just watching people play games, and that's a fantastic thing, and the future can only be expanded. But as I said before, I don't feel confident enough to tell you exactly what the metaverse is going to be in 3 years' time, let alone 5, 10, 15. So the exact skills, I think we have to be dynamic, but if we aim for interactive real-time 3D experiences and those core skills to create those, I think we set ourselves in good stead worldwide. And yeah, that's pretty much my, I think that was a lot shorter, but like I say, somebody beat me to the other graphic.
That's no problem, Stuart. I just want to thank you first and foremost. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. No, it wasn't, but I mean, though it was short, I think it was short and sweet. Like you said, Dr. Malialu really did delve deeply into the potential implications of the metaverse, you know, beyond, or rather, I should say, beneath the layer of experience. There really is so much potential. And, you know, we speak it in terms, you know, we speak in very, you know, to all of our participants, you know, we speak in very idealistic, we speak in sometimes technical terms, but there really is, it really takes a while to grasp, I would use the word, the bigness, the largesse of the potential for the metaverse, not only for experience, but how we can use experience to enrich already existing experiences, especially the academic, you know, traditions that have gone before, not only the traditional, you know, I would say source markets like Europe, but especially in the Caribbean. Now, I'm really excited to get into the conversation part of things, but before I get into the conversation part, I now want to transition and give the floor to Miss Christy Powell, you know, the young technologist, to make her presentation so that we can start to flesh this out a lot more and go beyond, you know, the traditional perception of the metaverse only being for gaming and social, you know, interaction. So Christy, I want to know
Thank you. I promise I won't actually keep you from the questions much longer, but thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you today on the panel. This theme obviously is focused on us to explore the skills that are needed for us to take advantage of the opportunities within the metaverse. And as we've come to understand through the past panel discussions and my predecessors, the metaverse is a 3D virtual space that will eventually mimic the physical nature of our real world and introduce the concepts of augmented reality and virtual reality technology. Two technologies that exist today, but will continue to evolve as humans continue to be curious and machines continue to get faster. And the metaverse gives way to driving rich interactive experiences in a virtual world, but it also allows us to remove barriers like proximity. In the Caribbean specifically, the metaverse gives us the opportunity to dream of a world where we may no longer have trade barriers that exist between, let's say, Jamaica and the Bahamas, for example. It can be argued that the metaverse will continue to be treated like a wholly new territory on its own. It will allow businesses from Trinidad or Antigua to participate in a singular market economy. And that's a topic that's been heatedly debated, I would say, for years in this part of the region. The impact of real world borders, treaties, and sanctions on the metaverse remains to be seen, but at its core, businesses will be able to trade freely without geographic constraints, and there's power in that. Due to the pandemic, from an educational context, both teachers and students have reached a new level of understanding in dealing with technology because they were ultimately forced to. And the metaverse, because we're an archipelago of islands, we can stand to gain from this technology. In a lot of remote islands, especially in the Bahamas, we can't always afford to send a specialized physics teacher for a handful of students to an island where the population may, probably only be approximately 50. but those students with the right level of access to technology can join a class in the capital. I propose that we quickly check with the government and students on how much they know about the metaverse. But during this adoption, we'll need to continue to be mindful of the digital divide. The divide refers to the existing economic and social inequalities that impact our access and ability to leverage modern information and technology. We will need to insist that those who need the access will have the access to ensure that they don't continue to fall further and further behind. The talent pool for emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, the Internet of Things, augmented reality, and virtual reality will continue to fall short in filling the global demand. CIOs and CTOs in both the public and private sectors frequently lament about the dearth in tech talent when discussing the challenges to their digital transformation efforts. For us to truly take advantage of the metaverse in the Caribbean with this new paradigm, we need to focus on the technology stack at its core. That means network engineers. How will we ensure that our networks are stable enough throughout the islands and strong enough for us to even participate in the metaverse? Software developers, are we producing enough software developers to be inventors of this new technology? Are we learning in our tertiary education institutions the right programming languages to support this? Data privacy and security experts. Public and private sector struggle with this today. Are they ready for the metaverse tomorrow? Currency and payment specialists. We can sell goods and services in the metaverse, but what will the new payment verification system look like? Lawyers focused on IT and compliance. How will this world be regulated? To help fill this void and answer some of these questions, the private sector is increasingly turning to a tried and true source, higher education. The idea of scouring campuses for tech talent certainly isn't new, but in other countries, companies are doubling down their efforts to lure and help train future technologists by partnering with colleges and universities on innovation labs, internship programs aimed at developing real-world digital skills. What that means for us is that the public and private sector in the Caribbean need to work together, and at the helm of this are the educational institutions who should use large companies that are moving to our jurisdiction to cultivate emerging technology talent so they don't continue to outsource tech talent specifically. Governments and companies should partner with universities to work on IT initiatives and stack a bench of emerging technology talent so we increase the pipeline. Rethink the curriculums that are being taught in the tertiary education level to include cutting edge technologies and practices to produce the right talent. Reskill internal colleagues to ensure that what we currently have in the IT region don't get left behind through continuing education. Ultimately, we will need the technology skills that we employ today at all levels to help us navigate our way through the metaverse tomorrow. So, Mr. Seeley, we can open the floor to questions at this point.
Well, thank you very, very, very much, Ms. Powell. I think that was a really, I keep using the word rich, but I really can't find a better word to describe the type of conversation that we're having. And, you know, beyond, so you've outlined so much specifically regarding, you know, young talent and the skills that are needed from young people. And, you know, as we're speaking in an academic context, I don't think we can really mention academia and mention, you know, a lot of the issues that we've been facing without mentioning the issue of brain drain. The Caribbean has been notorious for losing a lot of its top talent to, I guess, what can be considered the slower pace of economic development of you know, the Caribbean economies, their home economies not being able to utilize their skills as they are current. So I want to open the floor now first to all of the panelists, particularly with Dr. Malilu, and asks, what should we engage first to take advantage of the foresight of the metaverse? Before you answer, Ambassador Abed mentioned in the first conversation that we should begin with the learning campaign. But I find that as the CTU has had the foresight to really have this event, you know, to see that we can see where things are going, where should we begin then? Where should we start to take advantage of the metaverse and all of its rich opportunities?
Right, thanks, Java. Yeah, so if you ask me, as you did, where to start, I would say to start by having a forum amongst Caribbean-minded folk, which is to say Caribbean folk and folk with the Caribbean at heart, about what do you bring to the table? And that's where I would start. What do you bring to the table? We understand the metaverse is the next generation of the internet, and I think it is a natural progression in time. What we need is a broad set of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and products. And these require a rich ecosystem, to use your word rich, ecosystem of actors, both horizontal and vertical. The first step is to bring to the table all of these Caribbean-minded agents from all sectors to have a conversation. What do I bring to the table? Back over to you, Job.
Thank you. Before I even add, Stuart, I'd like to get your opinion, followed by.
Sorry, you cut out unfortunately for me then. I didn't quite catch that.
No problem. No, I know you may not be particularly familiar with the Caribbean context, but I was curious to find out, as the Caribbean right now is having, or rather at least the Caribbean Telecommunications Union and the Government of Barbados is having the foresight to have an event such as this. I was wondering, where should we start to engage or, build out our understanding and use of the metaverse to further develop the Caribbean?
Yeah, I think the initial comments from Dr. Mallory are really pertinent, really, that you need to understand what you already have and what is already there. And then it's understanding about what the shortcomings are. So what don't you have, and when you don't have something, one of the easiest methods to achieve it is to educate. So finding a method in which the skill shortages or the sort of progress, whatever it is that's stopping that potential growth in that area, and find a way to bring that into an education setting to bring young people through. You mentioned yourself about the passion that young people have for these sorts of experiences. If you can find those passionate people and give them the skills to produce it, you are going to find some amazing talent that can drive not only the metaverse, but regionally your successes. And I think for me, one of the things I enjoy most about my job is finding intensely passionate people who make amazing things, from relatively mundane things that we show them, because we have to show them things at a level that are kind of absorbable and understanding, and something that is, we can't show top level stuff straight away. We can't show the most difficult task. We can't show the full solution every time, because you need to learn, you need to get there. But then they produce these amazing artifacts out of the end of our courses or modules, or even just a session. And for me, that is where you need to not miss out on, is that there is so much passion coming through that of people that have grown up. The term digital native gets thrown around for people, say maybe 15, 20 years younger than me. But that digital native concept, we look at children now who pick up smartphones and don't have any problem using them, compared to my dad, who I regularly have to explain how to do simple things like turn the camera around on a WhatsApp call or something like that. These are simple things, but that's because they have an understanding, but also a passion for it. If you tap into that wealth of experience and interest that's already there in young people, I think you can grow you can fix the shortcomings that you might have for your existing infrastructure and skills.
Perfect. So that just leaves you, Christy. Where do you think that we should start?
Loaded question. I think it's all about opportunity, actually, in the Caribbean. And I think it's about taking a risk, specifically governments and private sector. What I've found over the last several years working in the region is that a lot of the technology is still outsourced, and that doesn't give young people an opportunity to grow their skill set and be curious. And I think it's up to organizations like the CTU to continue to push both the public and the private sector to say, listen, Mr. Seeley or Ms. Powell should have an opportunity to build X, Y, and Z and solve problem A, B, C. And when they don't give us the opportunity to actually solve those problems, they're doing us a disservice by continuing to outsource.
All I can say is that this is all very curious and very interesting. And one of the things, Stuart mentioned that the word digital native is thrown around a lot. And I mentioned in my in my introduction, that the metaverse is really going to be for all of us. And I say that for a reason that will become a lot clearer later. But before I take questions from the audience, who I know must have burning questions, I think we have the perfect panel for such a discussion as this. And therefore, I'd like to ask if any of the panelists have questions for each other.
Many, but not at this moment, I think.
Okay. Okay, no problem. So then, Ms. Garcia, back to the studio with Mr. Secretary General. Do we have any questions to field?
Yes, Java, we do. Burning questions from our audience. And this question came in from Ms. Sandra Welch, who asked, what about starting at our primary schools level to prepare this coming generation for their new world?
Mm. And I pose that question directly. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nigel Casimir. Just before you do, there is and also a related one to that, which is from Colette Primus Hanaway, who's asking, how would you advise the ministries of education in the region to prepare the youths to take advantage of this trend? So that's a little more general, and the one before was very specific to, do you think we need to take this down to the primary school level?
Perfect. I'll let the panelists have right at it. I can see Dr. Malilu already was very raring to go.
Yeah, I would say just very quickly that absolutely this has to start, I would say preschool. It has to start preschool, and it starts with a decision. What is, philosophically, what is the most important thing for us in the Caribbean? Is it that we want our students to be able to ace exams and therefore build an educational system backwards from that, starting at preschool, where they can pass exams and excel at exams? Or is it that we want to create a creative society where students are willing and able to fail, where students are eager to explore things that they have never seen or heard of before, and produce things that are meaningful or not? And that is the question we have to ask. What is it that we want? And then we work backwards, all the way back to preschool. Back over, only because we are time limited.
I wholeheartedly agree. I understand. I wholeheartedly agree. Stuart, I see that you wanted to speak, so you go right ahead.
Yeah, I think absolutely that that willingness to fail and try things and explore things, I think is key. I would say I've taught a form of programming to 6-year-olds in a primary school in the UK that went surprisingly well. Again, I didn't expect it to, if I was honest. It was targeted at 8 to 10-year-olds, but they asked me to teach a 6-year-old class. And actually, again, the interest level was there. And once there's interest, there will be engagement. And once you've got engagement, you will eventually find success. But I think one thing that for me, based on the previous comment and the previous answer, is we at the moment spend our time making sure people have digital literacy as far as being able to create a PowerPoint or create a Word document. Why not develop digital literacy to be able to create a small interactive experience inside the metaverse or inside a virtual reality application or an AR application? Even something as simple as helping children to use relatively straightforward tools to build an interactive experience can help them get that foothold into a new area of exploration beyond, oh, I can make a cat move across a PowerPoint or something like that. We can do so much better. And I think absolutely primary schools could benefit from opening that up to children, because they are intensely creative and will do interesting, fascinating things that perhaps the adults wouldn't have thought of.
I agree. And I think this moment is defined by a sort of a limbo period where the adults now have to really redefine how we take advantage of the, intuitive, or rather how, right, the adults now have to redefine how we can take advantage of children's familiarity with technology and the user interfaces and designs so that they can benefit from a lot of the natural curiosity that was trained out of us by our very traditional education system. And so, Christy, I'll let you have the final word on this question before we take one more, before we formally hand back over to Mr. Casimir for the live Q&A session.
Yeah, I think the question that was posed around the Ministry of Education is an interesting one. I think our educators, again, just from a Caribbean context, don't necessarily have the fortitude that Mr. Butler would have to deliver a course on coding. And so I think we have to make sure that we have people within the region and within the institutions at the primary school level in order to deliver the curriculum that's needed in order to make that happen. If you have a teacher who's in a classroom who's afraid of using the technology, how do you expect them to inspire and motivate a student to become a creator of technology when they themselves are afraid of it? So I think it first starts with a mind shift. And I think one of the previous presentations spoke about training the teachers themselves on how to deliver a lesson using the technology that's at their fingertips.
Perfect. So before we move on to Mr. Casimir, Ms. Garcia, I'll take one more question for the panel.
Thank you, Java. This question is from Michelle Batiste-Williams. This is directed to Dr. Malaliu. She's asking, how is the UE focused on leveraging metaverse opportunities with students and becoming a mecca for talent development and building the digital ecosystem?
Thanks a lot, Michelle. Michelle and Michelle. Yeah, so the thing is, it's a process, and how we have, and the process is there's a series component, there's a parallel component. So it's a developmental matter, and one of the chronologically, one of the starting points is our current activities with respect to digital transformation that lots of organizations across the Caribbean, across the world are engaged in. So we're still in that, getting to grips with that digital transformation. That, of course, represents a key component of the enabling environment for everything, for our business, for our academics, etc. So chronologically, that's a very big part of it. But also in parallel with that is redefining our curricula. We are re-looking at curricula, looking at curricula fit for the 21st century. And that also, even while it's in parallel, that is progressing apace chronologically as different members of our community are at different levels of adoption. It is, though, that we share a vision as a university of one university, not a number of disparate campuses, one university, one identity, and all of these, and very much understanding the grounding that our identity as a university is grounded in the Caribbean identity. So all of these are foundational aspects, albeit two-dimensional or three-dimensional, towards readiness for the metaverse, which, as I say, is a natural extension, as I say. And I'm going to hand over, though there's much more I could add, both Michelle's. Back over to you, Java.
Thank you very much. I'd love to take another question, but we are running out of time. But and I will invite all of the panelists to make their closing remarks. But I would first like to say that the conversation that we're having to me is very reminiscent of last year's UNCTAD 15 held in Barbados, where I worked with Dr. Annalie Babb, and she was the co-lead organizer of the Creative Industries and Trade Digitalization Forum that really focused on a lot of these core issues, especially regarding education and regarding how we reposition. And I know she mentioned having a company called Intersections that really focus on analyzing these issues and creating the knowledge so that we can now integrate a lot of what is traditionally seen as government responsibility with personal responsibility for not only learning, but taking advantage of a world that we usually see as becoming more equitable thanks to technology. And I know when the pandemic came, we all we labeled it as the great equalizer, the great unequalizer. But I think what it has indicated is that the world is much more ready for the metaverse than it may believe, as it relates to economic opportunity, especially the creator economy. The orange economy has grown exponentially. And I don't think that we can really speak about the growth of the creative economy or education without, speaking to the role that technology continues to play within the development. And therefore, as we're passing along these same skills to young people from as young as preschool, given that, everybody born in a time with the internet is now considered a digital native, we have to not only give them hard technological tools, but really instill in them, the same willingness to fail, familiarity with platforms, and understanding innately how to earn from their potential. I think they probably perhaps understand it better than us, especially those who aspire, to be YouTubers, to be professional gamers, beyond, persons who do digital twinning. And therefore, though this conversation is coming to an end now, I think this is the beginning of a much larger conversation that needs to be had. And therefore, I now want to open the floor to all of our panelists in the order in which they spoke to give their closing remarks.
Thank you, Java. I think that puts me first, only in that sense. I would like to make two remarks, if that's okay. One is I would urge everyone to recognize that these digital literacies and digital skills need to rest on a bed of traditional literacies and skills. And I would be heartbroken to see that we would attempt to replace those traditions with this new layer. They have to work together. I want people to be literate. I want our people to be able to speak and to think and to develop logical arguments as human beings. My second comment for closing is a challenge to the Caribbean Telecommunications Union to convene a meeting of all, to bring to the table what you are willing to give and what you need. Very simple. Here's what I have and here's what I need. Stakeholders from every walks of life that have an interest in Caribbean development. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Java, back to you.
Stuart, that means you're next.
Yeah, I think for me, I just want to say thank you to everybody. As you mentioned, I don't have perhaps the same awareness of the Caribbean sort of setup as many of the other speakers, and I've found the parts of today I've managed to join to be fascinating to listen to, and just extend an offer of assistance if anybody would like the input from myself or folks here at Staffordshire University to help growth or to help support teachers to develop the skills in primary schools to feel the affinity or the comfort to encourage children to explore these areas. The door's always open for that conversation if I can help. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Christy, that's all at you.
I think the only thing I would add is continue to encourage our youth to be curious and continue to support them throughout whatever it is that they want to do, specifically as it relates to innovation, but legitimately just continue to encourage them to be curious.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of theme 3 or conversation 3 of the Knowledge Cafe. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all, to my perfect panelists, as I label them. Thank you for making this conversation what it was. Thank you for beginning the conversation that we're going to continue to have, all thanks to the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, the Government of Barbados, CARICOM, and all of the other very important stakeholders. So as we are out of time, I'd now like to hand you over to Mr. Nigel Casimir, the Deputy Secretary General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, as well as Michelle Garcia, for the interactive open Q&A and end of webinar. I have been your moderator, Mr. Java Seeley, Barbados CARICOM Youth Ambassador, and the pleasure has been all mine. Thank you for the invitation. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Java. Nigel, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Java, thanks a lot, and many thanks as well to the panel. I think we had a couple of specific comments coming out of there, one of which related to Dr. Malaview's hope or suggestion or urge that the education on the metaverse and all these digital skills rest on a bed of more general education and skills. That in fact was also a comment coming from one of our viewers, basically asking, continuing the process of educating our children in history, geography, maths, English, science, and all of the traditional subjects. And also convincing them that this is the bedrock on which their future would depend. And even as we talk about success in the metaverse. We also heard about, or there were suggestions that we need to go back to preschool and primary school. And we'll definitely have to be looking at how do we develop the appropriate curriculum for those types of interventions as we go into this brave new world of the metaverse. One thing while we focus very much on the education segment here, we also had some comments coming in about interventions in other sectors of the economy. And of course, we're in the Caribbean here. They were asking about like the tourism sector and so on. And there were other questions that came in a bit late for the previous panels, but it's certainly what data that we will take forward as a CTU as we progress our education and adoption of the metaverse going forward. The program anticipated an interactive Q&A. I don't know if we had any other questions coming that we need to address at present, or find some way to note and take forward. Right, so we'll have your questions here on the platform.
And respond via the Q&A panel.
Right, and we respond via the Q&A panel. So at this point then, it just remains for me to bring to a close this initial webinar hosted by the CTU and the Government of Barbados on traversing the metaverse. As the Secretary General Rodney Taylor mentioned earlier, this is our initial intervention in this. And what we've sought to do today is more or less cover a scope of work, as it were. So it's like three webinars in one. We looked at different themes, and the information we get from him would guide us in going forward as we delve deeper into the specific themes as might be required to have success for the Caribbean in developing the appropriate policies and taking the appropriate actions to drive our success in the metaverse. I would ask that you look forward to our further interventions from the CTU. Dr. Mal, you have suggested a particular way forward that we can consider and take on board. But the success of these things all comes from focused attention. And we will be examining the feedback that we got from our session today, identify what are the areas that we think are of highest priority, what are the areas that maybe we did not address in today's session that maybe we need to bring forward for more focused attention, earlier attention. So just on behalf of the CTU, I would like to thank all our presenters today, moderators and panelists. In the definition section, His Excellency Gabriel Abed, Ambassador of Barbados to the UAE, and Messrs. Sebastian and Lotlikan, Mr. Sebastian from Sandbox and Lotlikan from Superworld. In the economic opportunities section, we had Mr. Vladimir Radonovich from Diplo in Geneva, the moderator, Dr. Annalie Bab, Mr. Lester Garcia of Meta, Professor Avinash Prasad of the CARICOM Commission, the Economy, and Mr. Alan M. Taj of Computer Scientists of Barbados. And our latest panel, which dealt with digital skills, Youth Ambassador Java Sealy, Dr. Kim Ali of the University of the West Indies, Mrs. Stuart Butler of Staffordshire University, and Christy Powell, technologist from the Bahamas. All of you have contributed greatly to the success of this first session on the metaverse, and I think from the participation of close to 500 persons on all through all the platforms below, Facebook and YouTube. I think the interest, it is clear, the level of interest that there is in this topic going forward, and it will remain on the agenda and the action plans of the CTU in the near and ongoing future. So with that, with the thanks from all here at the CTU, Michelle here, our master of ceremonies, for the whole session, all the support staff here at the CTU Secretariat. Thank you very much for your time and your inputs, and we look forward to continued successes and growing successes, and all in the metaverse as we move forward. Thank you very much.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us.
Recording stopped.